Our respected guests, our respected speakers and colleagues, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to Sharjah Museums Authority Conference, the Evolving Museum, Adapting, Learning, and Exhibiting in the New Era. This is Alia Burhima, the Education and Interpretation Manager at Sharjah Museums Authority. It is a great pleasure in this beautiful day to be with so many representatives of some of the top museums and cultural institutions in the UAE and abroad. We have a fantastic program that addresses many important issues facing our field of museums. This is the first online museum conference that SMA have organized, and it's one of its flagship programs to offer an amazing opportunity for exchanging best practices and for discussions among leading cultural institutions. For many of you joining us for the first time, we would like to give you a glimpse at SMA's 16 wonderful museums, with its great collections in arts, archaeology, heritage, and children museums. We can't wait to welcome you in person soon in our premises. Direct translation is available in Arabic in the interpretation feature available below. Make sure that you download the latest version of Zoom to have a successful experience with us. تتوفر الترجمة باللغة العربية في أيقونة الترجمة المتوفرة أسفل الشاشة. أرجو التأكد من تحميل آخر تحديث لبرنامج الزوم للاستماع إلى الترجمة إلى اللغة العربية بكل سهولة ويسر. Now we will prepare for our first session, The Future of Museum Exhibitions, and we will be back in 15 minutes.
Welcome everyone to the opening session, The Future of Museum Exhibitions, as part of the webinar series, The Evolving Museum, Adapting Learning and Exhibiting in the New Era. So in this session, we will discuss the role of interactive media experiences in contemporary as well as future physical exhibitions. So how can interactive media and technology be used in physical exhibition spaces, complementing objects and collections in order to create unique visitor experiences? What opportunities does this provide and what challenges may it create? My name is Frederick Gemeiner, and it's my pleasure to moderate this panel discussion. And I especially would like to welcome our two guest speakers who will join us in the upcoming 45 minutes. These are Leith Carlson, who is the Executive Director of the Museum of the Future Dubai. Welcome, Leith. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
And we also have with us Takashi Kudo, who is a member of the Digital Arts Collective Team Lab from Tokyo, Japan. Welcome, Takashi Kudo. Thank you for joining us. So before we begin the panel discussion, I would like to ask our guests to briefly introduce themselves and to provide us with some background information about their experience and work. And for that, I'm handing over the virtual microphone to Leith to share some insights with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Frederick. So before the Museum of the Future, which you see behind me, existed, there were actually many precursor museums of the future. My name is Leith Carlson. I'm the Executive Director of the Museum of the Future in its current iteration, being built, as you see behind me here in Dubai, which is an initiative of the Dubai Future Foundation. I come to this project actually in my 29th year of working in museum exhibitions. It's all I've ever done. So I'm quite fortunate in going from one spectacular project to the next, and really excited about the work that we're able to do here in Dubai. As I mentioned, we had precursor Museum of the Futures. So starting in 2013 with the World Government Summit here in Dubai, every year we put on an immersive exhibition on a different theme that attendees of that conference were able to go through. That experience proved so powerful for those attendees that in 2015, His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, Vice President, Prime Minister, and ruler of Dubai, unveiled a plan to build a permanent Museum of the Future. And that's what's nearing completion here in Dubai, right next to Emirates Towers. If those of you who've driven by on Sheikh Zayed Road can't miss it. It's actually one of the most unique, I think, buildings in construction anywhere in the world currently. And we were able to do a very spectacular light show last week for a national day here in the UAE. So, you know, one of the things that we're really doing with this project is looking at how we can present a completely immersive, a very unique museum experience for visitors to really get them engaged in how we might live in a more hopeful and optimistic future. And we're doing that through spaces that are not only physical spaces, but ones that we use very multi-sensory storytelling in that includes many digital assets as well. So I'm really excited to talk about some of that work here today. Also, I will mention that my previous museum had two pieces from Team Lab permanently installed in it. And I was actually this last year able to see their installations in Tokyo as well as in Singapore, and phenomenal work. I've always enjoyed everything they do. So I'm excited to share this platform today. So that's the perspective I'm coming at it from, is, you know, from a long history in museum exhibition work, but particularly with this lens of how do we create multi-sensory immersive experiences in museums, particularly museums that are looking to activate people to make real change in the world. and see the role for themselves in a positive and optimistic future, which under the current circumstances, I think everyone is absolutely eager to do and to experience that. So we can't wait to open the museum and hopefully in a world that's now obviously being increasingly inoculated from the virus. So, we're very hopeful that things are a bit more normal, and maybe next time we have a conversation like this, we can do it in person. So thank you for inviting me today. I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Thank you so much, Laith. Looking forward to the upcoming 45 minutes with you. Great to have you. Takashi, would you be so kind and give us a brief insight of TeamLab's activities as well?
Oh, yeah. Hey, this is Takashi from TeamLabs. We are like 600 members, so it's it's a little bit, it's a small screen for all our members. So it's today it's just only me. I will talk, but I'm Takashi at communication directors or something. It's a title is almost no meanings from our side, but it's, yeah, I'm very much appreciate to participate of today's discussions. What we are doing as TeamLabs is quite difficult to explain, and because it's most of our output is very physically physical installations, and it's our purpose is always try to bring the people to be inside of our imagination and the creativities, and our aims is we kind of it is very personal, maybe motivation or passions, but it's what is a world for human beings and how we recognize the world. That is very charmed us to be interested, and it's even through the process to create some our installations, we always fail and find some things discovered. It is like our exhibitions, or it's a famous exhibition. It's called the TeamLab Borders in Tokyo. It's now, of course, affected from this COVID situation. So it's now is less than half visitors. We try to limit, but that exhibition is 10,000 square meters and no map. And all you need, of course, you're gonna do it, you're gonna lost your way. And you have to, walk around, and you have to explore yourself. And if you're lucky, we hope people are gonna discover something through it's an experience. So what we wanted to say is we try to make it some kind of experience, because it's human beings is recognized. It's not only eyes, ears. It's more like physicals. At least me, I try to understand the world by physical, with touch and everything, smells, and that's it's gonna make me to understand some things. And this is like very much fundamental purpose of that, why we are doing all this very much interactives and physical installations. And we don't know we are successful or not, but we cannot stop ourselves. And we try to create something, and we are lucky to work with quite many museums and good curators and peoples. And I'm very happy to be participating today, because I was born in Tokyo, but I grew up in Abu Dhabi. أنا بحكي عربية يعني شوية. So السلام عليكم and شكرا حبيبي. So I'm very excited to discuss anything today. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Takashi. Great to have you with us, and thanks for the introduction. And it's also great to know that somehow Laith and you have been sort of in contact before through the work of TeamLab. That's amazing. I think that will also give us a great foundation today. And also both of you have touched interesting points I'd like to come back also throughout the upcoming session, which also you were talking about, first of all, also kind of a social responsibility somehow when making exhibitions, right? It's more than just providing multi-sensory experiences, but they're also embedded, of course, in the message and the meaning, which relates to the role of a museum. So, but maybe starting from that point, maybe from the visitor, from your experiences, what are typical visitor expectations today when visiting a physical museum in respect to interactive media experiences, and how might this potentially also change in the future? So this is also related to what you touched briefly, Takashi. I'll get back to that, of course, later. The situation we are right now in, so physical spaces right now have limited access, of course. And I think that's also particularly interesting to think about what the advantages of physical spaces are, of course, and how to deal with these limitations we are currently facing right now. And so these are just maybe some of the umbrella topics we can talk about from both of your experiences also and your perspectives. But maybe coming back to that question, maybe I ask you directly, Laith, what are typical visitor expectations today when visiting a museum in respect to interactive media experiences, also speaking from your past experience of being 29 years in that field?
Certainly over that long, history, I've seen the use of technology evolve quite considerably over that, time period. And actually, most of my experience has been in developing interactive technologies for museums. So I've been deeply involved in that process. I would say that, one of the things we're seeing with the pandemic is often people accessing museums through their digital assets increasingly. So whether it be through kind of their existing websites or apps, or purposely built programs and webinars, things like this that seem to be proliferating. And so it's my expectation that as people return more and more to the physical spaces, there's going to be an increasing engagement in the online spaces as well. I don't know if the expectation actually in museums will fundamentally change for the in-person visit, but what I would say that the big opportunity is more around extension of the visit, both before and after the physical visit. That's where I see a lot of potential growth happening. Something certainly that we're looking at more seriously than we might have before is making sure the experience is extendable in every way. And just to touch on your other point about social responsibility and the role of museums, I would say particularly most of my experience being in North America, we've definitely seen increasing push to have museums take on more pressing social issues, to be more active in how they engage people in trying to push for different types of change in a positive way. And I would say that's certainly an absolute basis of the Museum of the Future is, we are a museum that is actively looking at engaging visitors to make positive changes in the world. And so there's been a bit of a movement in the United States about museums not being neutral. And of course, it's impossible for them to be. But if you're not neutral, you should be very clear about what you actually are and the perspective you're taking and what you're trying to encourage people to do. And in our case, we are, we have a very defined purpose, which is encouraging people to work to make a better future for all humanity. And that drives all of the initiatives of Dubai Future Foundation, as well as the museum, is what can we do to promote positive visions of the future and then engage people actively in working towards them. And to me, that's where these kind of pre and post digital experiences really play a big role of how do you get people into the museum, get them really excited and inspired, but then follow up with definitive actions they can take to make the world a better place.
Yes, thank you, Laith. Interesting. Is that something that TeamLab also is kind of exploring more and more? So going beyond the museum experience itself, also the engagement before and after. Can you maybe give some examples?
Oh yeah, actually we are art collectives, and we are not museums. So it's we always appreciate for the museums to give us a space to show our image and creativities. But it's from our side. It means the art collective side. It's easiest answer is maybe in something that we cannot get from the like the internet or it's a digital world. That is people's expectation to go somewhere. it's not only in the museums, and it's me. I go to the, for example, like in the park every mornings. I really like to walk around. I can see the, like in the picture and the videos and even VRs of this park. But I really like to walk all this like, I don't know, 6 o'clock in the mornings, walk around the forest in a small, like, like in a park, and just smelling and enjoy with the sunshine. These things that we cannot, same experience, or we cannot get the information from the internet. That is, it's at least my motivation to go to the park. And it's each space has some kind of role, or it's motivations or purpose. The park has also maybe a purpose too, and it's museums also. Each museum has curators, and they have its very strong like roles and philosophy behind that. And we are not against anything. And it's for us, it's a digital and technology. From the artist side, it's that is the tools and the materials. It's for us is there isn't something we want to explain. It's like the glass said. It's our final purpose is we human beings, and it want to bring the people to be in better futures. And the thing is like somehow we human beings has very strong like very motivations, or it's a passion to understand and recognize the world. We don't know reason why. And it's one of the approach is a technologies, or it's a science. And it's a science is very much, it's, if I said my words, try to better resolutions. Like if you want to understand the forest is divided. The forest is a lot of the trees. And what is a tree? And a tree is a lot of the cells. And what is a cells? It's try to make an atom, and it's become like neutrinos and the things. And it's become higher resolutions to understand. But its point is the art is something we cannot explain by words, or something we cannot explain any other expressions. And it's, if you are be there, and you're gonna understand. And that one is, like different approach, but if we could, and it's, don't misunderstand, we don't know, it's our output is out or not. It's, we want and we believed, but it's an art or not is maybe in the futures, the history gonna decide. It's maybe our output gonna affect the human beings. And if the world started to believe of that, the world gonna, it's a shift to the, it's now that futures. And then it's, people gonna like code our output as art, but still we don't know it's, our output is art or not, but it's, we believe. And this is quite interesting for us. It's what is art, and what is logic, and what is designs. And it's, we believed groups is we can move, or we can control by logic. That is a logic. Everybody can understand, and we can be used for that. And that is answers. But the society, and it's, when the revolution happens, like internet, digital games, the right answer is going to be changed. Like right answer on 19th century couldn't be right answer on 21st centuries. It's the same things. And art is always a questions. It's, we are just, it's a making questions, and it's a very much smarter people than us. It's, they're going to find some answer for our questions. And it's things is human beings is not moved by logic. For example, me, I love my families, but it's not from my logic. It's not, it's a law. It's a, tell me, it's, you have to love your families. It's not, it's from my heart, like an emotions. And its emotion is moved by, it's something, it's, we cannot explain by words. And most of the times, like art or something like a joke or whatever we cannot explain by words, it's going to touch my heart, and I'm going to act. And that is the role of the art, I think. And it's museums is always support something in our activities. I hope it's an answer for that, but yeah.
Yes, fantastic. It's also completely, it's the other side basically also, because I think also it's great that you say like we are artists, because and also that you say like we are raising questions and we are creating subjective experiences, which is I think very contrary to somehow the role a museum would see itself in the past. In the traditional sense, it would usually, it depends of course on the type of exhibition, but I think in the past, particularly interactive media was more used in science centers and so on, which is there to provide answers, but make these answers somehow more graspable, I think, less scientific. But what I love about your explanation right now, that you're saying like we're creating subjective experiences, and the museum is the sort of forum for that. How do you see that, Leif, in kind of also your work when, for example, thinking about exhibitions like Humans 2.0 or the High IMAI exhibition, when working with media artists and embedding the work of media artists in a creational way into an exhibition that also has some sort of a message and a transportation along with informative and sort of edutainment aspects as well. What is your approach on that, Leif?
Sure, there's a lot packed into that question. So let me try to dig into it a little bit at a time. So first, I will say, any successful exhibition has to resonate emotionally. If it doesn't, there's frankly, no starting point. I mean, and I think, even the best, as you mentioned, science center exhibitions, the ones that actually were most successful, which I would say still, it's hard to match the original Exploratorium exhibitions, partially because they were created more by artists than by scientists, and they had a deep emotional and aesthetic component to them, which sadly, I would say the vast majority of science centers have lost. They've actually gone to a much more, I would say, mechanistic sort of a look at the world and not a creative one. And I think it's really, I would say that in my experience and having, perpetuated this myself for many, many years, science centers actually have the worst interactive experiences probably of any museums at this point. And I think the reason for that is that original genius of the Exploratorium was subverted in a really sad sort of way to basically this idea that, take anything you want to, quote, teach people and just make it interactive, and somehow that makes it better. Which in my experience, it's actually the opposite. But when you take that approach of tacking the interactivity on, what it does, and you can watch this if you go to a science center, what people will do is they'll try desperately to figure out the user interface. Once they've figured that out, they've had a moment of success, and then they walk on to the next thing, and they never get to the learning outcome that actually was the original intent, because it's not embedded in the experience. And this is where I would say Team Lab's work is exceptional in that it's absolutely embedded in the experience. The emotion is embedded in it. Every part of it is of a whole. It's not anything ever tacked on. It's never, it's never starting with this idea of let's make it interactive. It's starting with an idea of really engaging people in a meaningful, multi-sensory way. And that's why I think it works so well. So it's an absolute, and I think, it's a little bit sad that more institutions haven't taken the time to understand that. They look, I think, at the Team Lab work and they think it's so Instagrammable and beautiful, and we should have something Instagrammable like that, completely missing the point of the real power of it is not in the Instagrammability. It's in the emotional connection. It's in the cohesiveness. It's in the social aspect of the experience. And it's hard to replicate that. And I think that's why also the physical installations are so critical. I think, going to borderless and being in that physical space with other people and interacting, you can't do that online. There's no, purely web-based interface that's ever going to give you that experience.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a great answer. But maybe then going further with that, since you were saying that not so many museums successfully so far have been basically accomplished this synergy, of using interactive media to go beyond simple kind of explanations of what you also maybe could explain in non-interactive ways. What do you think is the reason for that? Is it also related to maybe the process of how exhibitions are made, and when do you think would be a good moment from your experience, and this question goes to both of you, to start integrating artists and other disciplines into the process, and what would be certain challenges with it as they are, the structures maybe also are right now?
So I would love to hear more about Team Lab's approach, but first I would just say I recently participated in another conference where there were people on the session with me who their title was head of digital. So literally they had digital as its own department within, you know, a very prominent museums. To me, that's absolutely absurd. And in that talk, I mentioned, can you imagine any company in the world right now separating digital and saying, okay, we do all of our business, and then we have our digital division over here, right? It's completely absurd. And so, and I think that's where a lot of the failures come from, is when it's treated as something separate, when it's, like I said, when it's like, let's create this thing, and then, oh, now let's add the digital to it, or let's add the interactive to it. And it's like, to me, if it isn't embedded in your process from the very beginning, and something that makes sense. I mean, I think, you know, one of the more interesting parts of my last museum, which featured on the world's largest collection of operable vintage computers, is that we didn't have to take that approach because it was already interactive. We were letting people, you know, type on an original Apple I or on world's first supercomputer. There's no need to make that interactive. It's inherently interactive. It's part of the story. It's embedded in it. And I think, once again, that's where Team Lab's work shines, is that it's embedded in it. It starts there, right? It's not like you're adding anything to it. But I would love to hear more about the process, because honestly, I haven't seen any insights into how you actually do what you do.
Yeah, from Team Lab side, it's what we can say is, you know, we are not teachers, so it's, you know, we don't know. It's we are not maybe good teachers, and it's what we are making is, you know, what is creating. It's something we believe, and it things is, for example, like the borderless is what we wanted to do is everybody has some kind of image inside of your brains, and it's you know, many concepts and ideas, and it's inside of your mind. It's affected each other's, and there is no boundaries. But when we try to explain something on this physical world, we have to use it as some kind of materials. When we use it as materials, and it's going to be fixed, and it's going to be, you know, no interactions, and it's, you know, and one ways, and it's things is the boundary is something is illusion, human made, at least on the creative side. And that is, you know, something we wanted to do on the Team Lab Borderless, because it's our imaginations and creativity is no limitations. And its element of this maybe internet is it's no limitations. If I said it's one word of this internet, is there is everybody can input and everybody can output, and there is no centers. So like this is like life. And it's if you go to the Borderless, or it's any other our exhibitions, or it's any exhibitions, what you're gonna learn, or it's what you're gonna feel is very much up to you. And it's me also. It's the park. Every morning as I was walking, and sometimes I walk with my son, and he's 6 years old, and he's gonna give me it's, you know, very weird questions, and it's, you know, why it's, you know, this leaf is become it's yellows, and it's, you know, it's charmed me, and it's oh, it's charmed you, why? And it's, you know, it's he is my teachers, and it's, you know, the park it just exists, and it's anything, it's any output, it just exists, I think. And it's, you know, like what we are creating is everybody has imagination and creativities, and it's now is we got it's a new tools and the materials and digital and technologies, and it's we can explain something, and it's, you know, our paint it's become light, and it's our canvas isn't everywhere, and after that it's what we can do, and we can bring the people to be inside of our imaginations, And then it's, like we can, it's maybe recognize with physical world, and we can work. It's not just watching the screen and stuff. And it's, and it's still, and it's even the movies, I really love it. I learned so many things from this in the movie too. And it's, just I saw that in the questions, and it's, some people went to our exhibitions, and it's couldn't, it's considered about some, it's, to be learned, but it's very much, my personal opinion is, it's very much depends on the persons. And if you didn't stop to think about, everybody or anything can be teacher of you, and it's anywhere you can learn. That is, human beings. And it's, if we stop, it's we're gonna just sit down and it's wait. It's somebody solve the solution, it's problems, and it's we're gonna accept. And it's another person is, maybe you're gonna create some things, and it's we don't know that the output is, right to answer or not. And it's maybe some people love it and some people not. And this is, what we are living right now. And it's after the internet, it's we got opportunity. Everybody can output, and it's, and it's this is quite appreciable. And it's, and we don't know about entertainment or like the art, what is difference. It's, it is very much, it's, like we are just like cucumbers, and it's museums is and the curator is a chef, and they're going to cook all this, like materials, and it's our output, and it's the creators and the museums going to create this beautiful food, and it's, and you're going to enjoy it. And some people don't like pastas, and some people love the sushi, and some people doesn't like it in sushi, and some people love it in pastas. I really like falafel, and I really like it into so many Arabic food, and it's very much depends on. And that is what I can say. And it's most easiest way is with Team Labs is quite open. So like, if you really want to learn about like digital art or it's in our output, just contact us through the internet, and it's try to be one part of this Team Labs, and it create some things with us. And it's on the process, maybe you're gonna find some things. And museums also, it's we do always, it's try and errors, because we don't know what is the right answer, like exhibition on in the museums today. But it's still, we scared, and we just try. And that is what we are doing.
Thanks, yes. So I could go, it inspires me a lot. Particularly you use the metaphor of a park, and then I also wonder, like, maybe you see yourself then also as a landscape architect, and where would you create spaces to enhance community and so on. But I would maybe, because the time is running, unfortunately, and there are some questions also already in the Q&A panel. So I would encourage everyone from the audience also to use the Q&A feature here and give comments or feedback or also questions. And here's a question: do you have examples of places that combine both learning and entertainment successfully? Maybe.
Yeah. I think it's, for example, at the park is quite much. It's, like a Central Park. It's if you're living in New York, you're going to go there, and it's what's happened. It's every day is different, and it is interactions there is. And if you walk, it's even if you didn't realize, sometimes it's some small seed. It's gonna touch your pants and it's trousers, and you walk like 300 meters, and the seed was it's falling down, and that seed is gonna make it a new life. And it's like we are just small one existence of this huge world. And it's like what is the learning and it's an entertainment is like in a park is sometimes Central Park is maybe for some people it's entertainment, and some people for it's meditation, and some people it's like full of this like learnings, and it's what we are doing is we are not an university or it's anymore like a student. And what is the biggest difference from the student and it's in the societies is we don't have right answers. And it's on the school, there was 1 + 1 = something. But it's, like on real world, there is no right answers. You have to say something. If there is 1 + 1, you can say 3 or 5, 6, 7. And it's, you can show it's why it is 7. And it's, why I like in the 7s. And it's make them people to understand. And that is, I'm so sorry. My answer is always too much in like a metaphor and stuff, but it's, like what I can answer is like this.
It's great. Thank you so much.
Actually, it's interesting, Takashi, that you bring up the metaphor of the park. I've given some talks in the past about the peculiarity where people will talk about using a park or using a library, but they're always visiting a museum. And to me, that seemed fundamentally wrong. So, one of the things that I've worked for 10 years or so is how do we pivot people to thinking about museums as useful as a park? But one of the challenges with that is we often think about museums as something you kind of have to go and see everything and do everything. Whereas when you're talking about a park, I completely relate because I spend a lot of my time outdoors as well. And you're not like, if you go to a park, you're not necessarily feeling like you're a failure if you don't use the basketball court and the swimming pool and sit on every bench. And, but yet in museums, we often treat it as a failure when somebody who comes to the museum doesn't see everything and do everything, read every label, right? And to me, it's always gratifying when you do see people who make it a regular habit to go to museums and to use them for various things. Actually, I had a friend of mine in Philadelphia who had twin daughters, and he would take them every day to a different museum. I think there's about 45 museums in Philadelphia. So they would actually just go to a different museum and use that as their homeschooling. And then they would take an iPad with them, and if they needed more information, they would look it up. And that was a core part of how he schooled his kids. And I thought that was just so brilliant, but it's also an incredibly isolated case. Rarely do you actually, I think, see that. And I'd love to see more of it because I think in most museums, there's incredible potential to use them more like that park and less, I think, like we traditionally think about a museum visit.
Yes, I agree. That's interesting. So there are many more questions popping up. We have 5 more minutes. I try to to not read them all, but just pick some. So there's one question: will the interactive experience give an opportunity to communicate with guides as well to answer the visitors' questions? So I think that's more like from a museum maker's point of view. Again, it comes to the engagement and maybe of the role of the guide, maybe within these interactive experiences. Is there still a need for a guide? How do you see that role?
Sure. I mean, obviously in COVID, this has become a bit of a challenge, but from a research perspective, we know through studies that the highest rated museum experiences are always ones that includes physical interaction with a staff person or other guests. This is absolutely true. And so I think that we, like the physical space is so integral to the museum experience, I think that the staff are also incredibly important. So that's something I think we're all grappling with in a kind of post-COVID world is how do we continue that engagement? So that said, there is also, I think, a great opportunity, though, to use digital tools for those people who do want to dig deeper. That's something we're certainly looking at with our exhibitions. The amount of research that goes into them is, just absolutely astounding. And we have, experts from all over the world that we reach out to do the background scientific research that leads us to our exhibitions. 90% of that or more would normally never be seen by someone coming to the museum. So one thing we're interested in is how do we use digital tools to expose all of that research and make it accessible, let people who are interested in digging quite deep, let them dig deep. So I think that's a great opportunity. And that's where I do think the best sort of museum technology is going, especially on the apps and mobile platforms, is really allowing, not only people to dig deep, but also to have multiple voices, multiple perspectives. I love actually the bootleg audio tours that, kind of unsanctioned audio tours that have popped up for museums, all around the world, particularly ones in some of the British museums around decolonization of collections and, really telling the stories of where some of the, artifacts have actually been taken from.
So the conclusion is that in this case, interactive technologies will not kill jobs in museums. It might be even the opposite, right? Because that's something to potentially enrich the experience. Is that something that would be maybe also something interesting to know about Team Lab's approach? How do you see the role of the museum staff and also the sense of community that you create in your installations?
It's a especially it's in our output. It's very much based on the presence. It's like sometimes it's what we are making. It's just like experience, and it's just presence what you are. And it's a point is what personally I expect of the curators and the museums is there is so many like histories. And it's in the stories, and there is we are not God. We cannot create 0 to 1s. We are very much affected from the like human heritage or the nature's phenomenons, and it's so many like things to be affected our output. And these things we cannot explain on that our output, because our output is just our output. And we don't explain by ourselves. And it's like sometimes it's and it's quite many times it's in our museums we work with. We have discussed it long times, and we try to understand so many things. And they are our teachers, and they are explained to the other people. It's what is in our output. It's what is like affected from our Asian drawing styles, or it's what is something it's new, and it's there is just small hint. And it's me personally, again, I'm sorry, it's if I walk around the park, if I walk with guide, and it's if he can, it's botanist or something, it's he can explain to me it's what is this. And it's like if there is like 60 years every day walking around the Central Park, if I could walk like in 15 minutes with him or with her, it is quite interesting. Maybe he's gonna say, or she's gonna say, this big tree, like 60 years ago, it was like a super small, and now it's become like this big. And this kind of the story, it's charmed me a lot. And we cannot see it if we didn't meet or to be with them. And it's, the museums it's very much, effective for the, our knowledge and the human's wisdoms. And if we can work with, it's, we can explain, we can focus to something in our output. So at least for me, I would love to work with, like great like museum and the curators. And it's completely makes sense with for us to, for me, it's museums and the curators.
Yes, thank you. I think that was a good wrapping up statement as well, because we are already a little bit over the time, unfortunately. This went super fast, but yeah, it was super highly interesting discussion, I think, and I would like to thank both of you very much for your time and sharing your very interesting insights and experiences with us. And also, I would like to thank everyone else for attending. I'm looking forward to the upcoming sessions in this webinar series. Also, thank you for Sharjah Museum authorities for organizing these events. I guess there will be also sort of a forum available. So in case there are pressing questions, I hope there will be a platform to discuss that further on the internet. Stay safe, have a wonderful day or night, actually, wherever you are right now. And yeah, enjoy the upcoming events.
Yeah, and sorry, I couldn't answer for all the question, but please feel free to send me questions anytime. I try to, and I hope to see you in the futures in the physical world.
Absolutely, thank you so much.
Yeah, shukran.
Thanks, Leif. Thanks, Takashi. Have a good day or night. Bye-bye.
So hello and welcome everyone to the second talk for today as part of Sharjah Museum Authority's webinar, The Evolving Museum. My name is Ali Al-Mulla, and I'm curator at Sharjah Art Museum. And I'm really excited to be moderating today's talk, which is on diversity in art exhibitions. Just to quickly give you a breakdown for the session. So the duration of this talk will be 45 minutes. After I'm done with the introductions and the topic, our presenters or speakers will be giving a very brief short presentation about their work and what they do, followed by a discussion, and then we will have the Q&A session. So with me today, I have two very diverse and dynamic museum professionals who will be sharing with us their experiences and practices on this complex topic. So let me begin by introducing our speakers first, both who've made notable contributions when it comes to displaying and curating and collecting. So first, I have with me Danielle Koujen. She holds a master's in museology from the Rijnwaard Academy, Amsterdam University of Arts. She is acting director and co-curator at Imagine IC, which is a pioneer in the field of contemporary heritage practices. Recent projects she produced here were on topics of resistance, gender, and slavery. At Imagine IC, she also heads the co-collection lab, and this lab researches a variety of collection questions like how to work with shared authority, democratizing heritage practices. As a freelancer, she is active in the heritage field as well under the name of Heritage Concepting. Her main focus in projects is on participatory collecting methods, action curating, and reflective practice. Danielle is also an active member of ComCall, which is ICOM's International Committee for Collecting, and since 2019, she is in the role of chair. Our second speaker for today is Suhaila Taqash. Suhaila is curator at the Barjeel Art Foundation in Sharjah, where she works on research, curatorial development, as well as exhibitions, and oversees the production of their publications and other publications as well. She holds a Master's of Science in Theory and Criticism of Architecture and Art from MIT, Department of History, where she was enrolled in the Aga Khan Program for Islamic Architecture. She is also co-curator of the current exhibition Taking Shape, Abstraction from the Arab World, which opened earlier this year at the Grey Art Gallery and NYU. She is also co-editor of the publication of that same exhibition. She has previously curated exhibitions at Contemporary Art Platform in Kuwait, the Aga Khan Museum in Toronto, amongst others. A very warm welcome to both of you. So before we begin with the short presentations, just to give you a quick overview about the topic itself. Museums as institutions are striving to be more diverse, whether by diversifying our collections, reviewing interpretations of the existing collections, as well as diversifying our team members and management. When we talk about diversity, and it's a word that we keep hearing a lot nowadays, what do we mean when we say diversity? So diversity is not just in diversifying your art exhibitions or bringing in different artists, let's say, or having different visuals or thematic elements in your exhibition. It's a lot more complex than that and has many layers to it. So what exactly do we mean when we say diversity? I mean, it comes down to a basic question, which is, do I see myself represented in this exhibition or in this space or in any of its education, public programs offered, or even in the institution itself? There are four dimensions or elements to it. Diversity could be internal, it could be external, it could be even organizational or a worldview. For example, things like a person's race, their ethnicity, their languages, their socioeconomic status, their age, even physical disabilities, your religious or political beliefs, or any other ideologies. These are all part of or elements of diversity that need to be considered. We have to understand that each individual is unique, and we recognize these differences, and we somehow incorporate all of these elements and need to review and reconsider how we program our future exhibitions and how future decisions are made. So the concept of diversity encompasses acceptance and respect as well. So hopefully in this session, we will focus on a few examples of diverse approaches in art collections and display. We also hope to look at practical examples and try to come up with solutions or even methods to apply. Although, I mean, the time 45 minutes is surely not enough to cover this entire topic, which is very deep and complex, but hopefully Our speakers will be able to present their experiences in creating these diverse art experiences and share with us their thought process and considerations as well, and how do audiences in the end respond to these exhibitions. So without wasting any more time, I would like to begin with Suhaila. Suhaila, if you can please share your screen with us. And for our audience, please feel free, once we're done with the presentations, you can type in your questions in the chat box and we will try to get to as many as we can. Suhaila, you would have about 7 to 10 minutes, and then we will go forward to Danielle.
Great.
All right.
Thank you so much, Alia, and hi to everybody in the audience. I'm so pleased to be joining into the conversation today. And as Alia mentioned, of course, you know, the word diversity can be understood in so many different ways in how it pertains to museum exhibitions and the museum experience, as well as the evolution of art collections as well. And my presentation today will primarily focus on a single example, a case study of Barjeel Art Foundation's current exhibition that is on display at the Sharjah Art Museum, titled A Century in Flux, Chapter 2. But before we dive in, I was thinking it would be nice to pause for a moment and just reflect on the value that pursuing and cultivating diversity in the museum experience actually brings. You know, why do we strive, or why should we strive to represent a multiplicity of voices and a range of experiences and backgrounds, be they economic, political, social, or otherwise, in the museum experience, and, you know, more broadly also in the writing of global art histories. You know, why is it important to kind of look at the places and particular practices and groups of people that have customarily been in some ways relegated to, let's say, the peripheries of mainstream art history? So how do we look at them and bring them back and situate them as integral parts of a global history, and not just something that, you know, happened somewhere far away as a one-off and, you know, kind of tokenize it in that way. So I think that one of the values of cultivating diversity is not only to kind of present a more colorful picture of a particular time period or a community, but it is also a step, I think, towards writing more honest histories, and also a step, however small, in the direction of destabilizing particular power structures that invariably exist within any community or any context. So if we take the example of the Arab world and Arab art history, which is something that the collection of the Barjeel Art Foundation deals very closely with, then in looking at the Arab world as a whole, we can't, you know, we can't escape considering the histories of minorities such as the Kurdish or Armenian or Greek communities, and otherwise the Amazigh communities. So it is only by considering kind of the variations of the practices and experiences and histories and cultures of different groups of people that we can really kind of begin to tell a more complete story. And as Alia already mentioned, I think, which is an incredibly important point, and perhaps this is something my co-panelist Danielle will speak more to, this idea of recognizing yourself in a museum, right? When you go to visit an exhibition, do you really get a sense of belonging from the objects and the stories that you encounter? So this brings me back to the case study I mentioned earlier, which is an exhibition currently on display at the Sharjah Art Museum. So with approaching this show curatorially, we decided to do something a little different from what we had done before, and curate a completely gender balanced show, meaning that if you walk into the exhibition, you will encounter the same number of objects produced by men and women artists. And this is an idea that has been in the works for quite some time. We talked about it not only internally, but also with our art community and the academic community. And then Sultan Soud Al-Qasimi, the founder of the Burjil Art Foundation, has also put it up for public discussion on his social media platforms. And we have received a very diverse range of responses and reactions towards the idea, some of which were very supportive, however, others that raised certain critical issues. And this proved to be quite a contentious curatorial direction to take. So I thought that today I could share some of these arguments that were posed to us and how we went about thinking them and mediating them. So one point that we were confronted with is that by pursuing such an approach, we might not be accurately representing the context or the time in which these artists were practicing. Because while it is true that a lot of these women artists produced work alongside their male peers, many of them did not receive the same kind of recognition or visibility, or didn't have access to the same kinds of galleries, museums, dealerships as their male counterparts. And so in presenting them within a single exhibition space, we're sort of misrepresenting what was really happening on the ground at that time. And the way we thought about this critical point is, while it is true that a lot of these women did not receive the same kind of visibility, it would also not be right to assume that they haven't made work, right? They were still practicing and very much kind of active in their production. And this, if we zoom out a little bit and look at it from a wider lens, it also brings us to the question of what is really history. It is a human construct. It is something that we as humans write based on how we experience, observe, and record past events and the work of people that came before us, and how we interpret all of that information. And so I think that it actually becomes a critical responsibility for us to look back and reevaluate, have we really told the histories, the histories that we're dealing with accuracy, right? Another point, of course, was about quality. So would we sacrifice a masterpiece by a male artist for a mediocre work by a woman just because we have this objective of creating a mathematically, let's say, equal exhibition, right? But I think whenever affirmative action is applied or enacted, by definition, it only allows the entries of qualified sort of artists, be they artists or, whichever other context we take it in. And so, of course, this is open for debate and in interpretation, but as someone who has worked on the exhibition, I would actually argue for every object, be it by a male or female artist, holding their own and really being representative of the standard of production at that time. And I know we're running short on time, but probably the last point that I would bring up is this idea of tokenization, right? It is very easy to be kind of skeptical towards a project like this and, kind of have doubts about whether this is done as a, as a publicity stunt or as a symbolic gesture or something that hasn't been very well thought through. And there's valid reason for, for all of, these directions of thinking, because it has been done time and time again. If we look especially at some of the recent exhibitions in North America, a lot of them have taken the subject of the Arab woman as kind of their driving force, and in many ways exoticized the subject and tokenized the woman, in many ways removing her from the context and the very complex and layered history. And I would say to this argument that, you know, rewriting histories takes a lot of time. And at least in the past 2 years, which is the experience that I can speak to, because, you know, that's when I became involved with the project, we have been making more efforts into researching and documenting these artists, and not, you know, kind of making this as a one-off thing. And hopefully this will become a sustainable direction in which not only the exhibitions of the Baudrillard Art Foundation, but also the collection will move towards. And I think in the interest of time, I will hand it back to Alia, and we can dive into some of the other questions.
Sure, thank you so much. Yeah, actually, I do have a lot of questions, but then we'll keep that for the discussion. Daniela, if you have any, if you could share your screen with us, and then we can quickly go through the slides before we go to the questions.
So thank you so much, Alia, for your kind introduction, and great to follow you, Sohaila, with your thoughtful, sharing your thoughtful process on this. So I will talk a little bit about Imagine IC to you today, where I'm since October the acting director, but have been working on already for some years as a co-curator. And already in the name of co-curator, we actually make a statement towards the thoughts of diversity. So it's not only me that is creating and curating exhibitions and programs, but I'm doing that together with the neighborhood we are based in. So here I just briefly shared with you, so we are based at the southeast district of Amsterdam Southeast, and we share the house with the Public Library of Amsterdam, and we, as you can see, we're a very small team. So we started up in 1999, and ever since we've been working from the concept of who are we? If we are representing heritage, who is the we in the equation? So those who are, or those who come here, are they also part of the we? And as Sohaila said, it is important for us that in collections and in representations, we can recognize ourselves, because that is so important for all the cultural exposures, for the heritage that we share, that we feel and can connect to it, and creates a sense of belonging. So based in Amsterdam Southeast, which was since the 60s a metropolitan extension, where until today it has daily received new people from all over the world. We investigate, collect and document stories of daily life in the city and the country, together with all those who are and who come here. So we seek to raise awareness of the significance of representing multiple voices. We invite our participants to share their stories, but also to listen, to encourage them to see the world through the eyes of another that might look at the world completely different than we do. So how does that look? If we look to the world through somebody else's eyes, and can we maybe understand each other a little bit more if we listen to each other in that process? So we do that with the people in the neighborhood we are based in. So these people bring in topics, and on these topics we organize programs where we talk, we collect, and we create exhibitions. So they are together with us at the table of what is represented and what is presented. I'm just trying to somehow there you go. So this is, for example, Suruj, who shared in Southeast with us his daily mediation during an event that we organized around intangible heritage and religion. He talked with academics and curators in relation to the UNESCO Convention of Intangible Heritage about what to safeguard. So if we collect, what should we collect then? Here a glimpse of our semi-permanent exhibition. Since 2014, we are working on the neighborhood archive and a semi-permanent exhibition where we share the stories of Southeast. Outside of Southeast, however, the entire borough is often referred to as the Bijlmer and evokes images of a rough urban jungle. But many people that live in the Bijlmer do not relate to this image. They play football in the park or at the stadium, run a business, create art, or say a prayer in the many different places of worship. So to create different narratives and to have different presentations, we basically organize events where on topics, we collect stories and objects with the neighborhood from which we make exhibitions. And from which then again, we organize all kinds of programs to share all these different views and perspectives. Now, I briefly want to talk to tip on a collaboration we have with the Tropen Museum, for which we work already for many years, as part of the Museums of World Culture and also the Research Center for Material Culture. We actually combine our participatory way of working with their collections. So they are in need of redefining the collections that often has been come into through the colonial period, and they want to actually try to give new meaning to them. So what do these collections mean for today, for all these different people that are living in this city, and also for the people from the diasporas that these collections are from? So this is an example of the 30th anniversary of the independence of Suriname. As a former colony, the Tropen Museum had a huge collection on Suriname, but little actually on the most recent past. So from the moment Suriname became independent, there was not much collected. So, but we found out that a lot of people that were living in Southeast did keep a lot of objects that were connected to this independence. So what we did is we collected together with the people from the neighborhood their stories and their objects. And we also visited the collection in the museum, and they had a look at what was there, but also they could respond and react to how these stories were told and what kind of information was available. And the result was two-way. We created an exhibition with some of the objects that they selected from the museum and the private collections from the people. But as a follow-up, they also went back to the museum to advise them on more information on the objects that were in the museum. So that way, we found a way also to annotate and to update the collections and the knowledge of these collections by connecting the people with these objects. The second one we did was around a Ghanaian collection, and the principle was the same, but this was what we called Ghanaian at home. So we asked people, there's a lot of people living in Amsterdam Southeast with Ghanaian roots, and we asked them, so how do you create a sense of home? And what does home mean? Is home here or there? And do you recreate them there, here? And how? And what kind of objects do you use with that? And then we also asked them to look at the objects in the museum and say, are there objects in the museum that also call up that sense of home? So they brought in one of their own private objects, and they selected one of the objects from the museum, and they were interviewed with that to create their own narrative with that. And the interesting thing is that that way a dialogue was started between the private collection and the collection in the museum. And therefore also the collections in the museum become more valued and get more meaning because new layers are added to that. So this is a little bit on how the visit to the depot was and the objects that from private and from the museum were collected. So I want to close with something else. So to make sure that we don't completely in our work are focusing on just a Dutch gaze, we also try to work internationally as much as possible to learn from what happens around the countries everywhere in the world and where people are also working in a participatory way. So how can we learn from that? Because even though we are already doing this for 20 years, there's still a lot for us to learn as well. And even though we think we are diverse and our team is diverse, I think we can always be more diverse. So there's always something to strive for. So this is an example of Mai Al-Brashi from Atharlina in Cairo, where we did an exchange. She came to the Netherlands to present to a big audience of architects and heritage professionals on how she works in Cairo. And in return this year, just before COVID, we went there to share with her team how we are working. And from that, now we are actually working on updating both our methodologies to find new ways on work in diversity. So I hope I stayed within the time. I really did my best, Alia. So okay. I think we should go to the discussion.
Sure. Thank you so much, both Sohaila and Danielle. That was quite interesting and fascinating to hear from both of you, and very different perspectives or approaches, let's say, to how diversity was tackled in two very different projects. I will just start off with the first question. I think it can be for both of you before we get to the questions. So we got this example from Sohaila about the whole gender balanced exhibition that they had done and how they felt there was a need to do this right now. And then Danielle, with your example that you gave us with working with the community and collecting objects with them and adding it to existing collections. So in this case, I mean, if you could tell us then who owns the narrative for the collection or for the works? As Barjeel Art Foundation, do you take that responsibility, or do you leave it open for the audiences to engage and come up with their own narratives to understand and interpret these collections? Is there a set way to understand these collections and these works that you have worked on with whether, let's say, with the community or whether it's displayed in the museum? Can you share your thoughts on this, both of you?
Yeah, I guess I'll jump in first. Thank you, Alia. That's an excellent question. I don't think any one person or one institution can actually own a narrative. All we can do is present objects, stories, histories, records to the public, and then hopefully that both the general public, but also the academic and the scholarly audience will engage with these objects, and these stories or particular records will kind of open up new avenues for interpreting the period, the time periods, the objects themselves, and also the artist's trajectories, right? So I wouldn't necessarily take responsibility for any one way of seeing these objects, but what we feel is a responsibility of an institution is to say that these practices were there, and to open that pool up as much as possible. So in that, I would say yes, institutions do have a responsibility towards representing, and I think that people can only be we can cultivate diversity only by hearing the voices, right? So the more voices we actually attempt to highlight or give a platform to, the more understanding, mutual understanding, the more recognition of oneself in a community one can feel. So yeah, I hope that kind of answers the question, or yes, begins to answer the question.
Sure. Danielle, would you like to add something to that?
Yeah, I think I follow Sohaila in that as well. I think we don't own, we collect these stories, and we, together with the people who are bringing these stories, we share them. But we are transparent in that they are the owners of these stories. We are not. We are basically, in that case, just the messenger to give them a stage and to be able to share them with more. And we always try also in our introductory texts with exhibitions to be very clear about our positionality and those of the participants, to be transparent about that. Also that what people see, and that they will have their own, they put their own meaning and layer to it as well by going through the exhibition, but also that we are never complete. So we can never represent all the stories. And we also have to be, so it's never the story of the, so we always are very careful also with the wording around that.
Question for you in particular regarding the show that was opened at NYU this year, and I believe it will be touring in other venues as well. So my question is, I mean, I believe that diversity also changes geographically. What kind of appeals or works with audiences here might not be the same in the West for whatever reasons. So, I mean, the Arab art collection that was shown here at the museum, even at the time when you were displaying at the Maraya Art Center in Sharjah, I mean, the audiences were kind of the same. But when you take that same collection to the US or anywhere else, what challenges do you face, and how does the display or the interpretation of these works change? Because people are definitely not familiar with most of these artists or even the styles. And they're used to a certain kind of a museum experience. You go in, everything is very aesthetically pleasing, and you walk out, everything is good and happy. But I mean, you're bringing in these radical changes into the museum or in the display. So how is that done?
Right. Yeah. No, that's a great thing to think about. And I think I personally, as a curator, only started thinking about it when we actually began to take the collection internationally. But, you know, kind of reflecting on it and looking back, I would say that, yes, the didactics change. So the way we present labels and wall texts and audio guides, you know, the way we design that probably changes. But when it comes to the curatorial narrative, the historical narrative, I would have to say that it actually doesn't sway it that much. The geographic location of where the collection will be displayed doesn't necessarily sway it that much, because we are here to bring those histories to an international audience and not necessarily appeal. I mean, our goal is not to appeal, but to shed light on some of the stories that have been written out, and, you know, point to the areas that need to be more researched and more documented. And it's a very long process, as you know, collecting data and actually generating knowledge around these objects. So I would say, yes, the reception definitely is different, the audience reception, and we've had that in across contexts. Kind of, we always get questions that surprise us, and we try to cater based on that. You know, what kind of historical background do we need to give them? You know, what kind of events or timelines should we provide, just to kind of paint a clearer picture. But in terms of the objects and the histories, I think it's actually the value of bringing art from this region internationally that you get to, you know, to make these stories known for what they are, and not, you know, try to kind of gear them towards how they might be received. I mean, I think that could be one of our not goals, but, you know, something that goes with curating things in different parts of the world across communities, that sometimes you do end up provoking, but that's okay, because that starts a conversation and brings up critical questions, and that's all part of this process.
Yes, I completely agree. I mean, the whole point, I mean, museums have now become this melting pot of discussions, engagement, and discourse.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for that, Sohaila. Danielle, I have a question for you. With your work with the community and collecting objects and in displays, how do you think existing collections can appeal to community members across a broad spectrum of backgrounds and experiences. How do you widen that access? I mean, not just with the works that the community has collected themselves. I mean, when we talk about bigger museums and other institutions, how do you think, I mean, is there a way, or maybe like a practical strategy or a plan that these existing collections could appeal to the broader audience members? How can we do that?
Well, I think actually what we are doing in very small now with the Tropy Museum is something that I remember also. I think UCL in the UK was working in the past as well, and there were in the UK some toolkits developed on revisiting collections. So how you can revisit existing collections with different groups, also with youth, for instance, and to bring them together and basically put objects on the table as a conversation piece, and to see how it can bring new meaning. Because the moment you can relate to it and relate to your own stories, it will create a better sense of meaning instead of just being an object of history. For us, that is what we are actually doing with the Tropy Museum as well, is to not look at and not ignoring the historical narrative that goes with it, but also what is the meaning in it in the now, and how can we connect to that and make new narratives with that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does actually. I mean, it kind of also reflects to what one of the speakers had just said in the earlier session, that how we view art in the 19th century is not the same in the 20th century. And I'm sure it will change later on as well. So I mean, it's kind of evolving, and we need to work our ways around it and find better options.
Yeah, we should not be lazy, I think, and
exactly.
not think the work, the objects will do the work. We have to actually find a way to do that.
Exactly. And I feel we need to keep on moving, because I mean, we just don't stick to one method and that's it, because that's what was happening for decades and centuries in many museums. I mean, now I feel it's the time for change.
Absolutely.
Coming back to our time, I think, we should head now to the questions. We have quite a few from our audience. I have a question for both speakers. In your opinion, what policies could identify possible gender gaps and inequalities and eliminate these factors in museum programming and exhibition considerations? Any policies, strategies you think, I mean, things you've worked on and you realized that yes, this works and this is how it could be done?
Yeah, I mean, I can jump in, Danielle.
Sure, yes.
Yeah. Well, you know, as I said, we pursue kind of diversity and by making sure that voices are heard. And I think this is probably one direction of, you know, start to question yourself, how can I make particular voices represented in an institutional context? But, you know, it's so funny. I feel like I'm always critical of sort of existing methodologies, whether they are in curating or in academic research or whatever they are. And then when I'm asked, well, what do you propose? I often don't know, because, you know, I think that in terms of policy, we probably have to look at particular examples and case studies and see what works for you know, that specific project or organization, and kind of move from there. So I'm all for starting it from the bottom up and seeing what works and testing things out, and then, you know, kind of moving on from there and developing something that's organic. And in that way, I feel like it's just more sustainable that way, because you're actually feeling things out, and whatever changes you make then become kind of systemic, because they're ingrained with the entire framework of how something functions. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Sohaila. I think also that because it's constantly changing, and also the world around us is constantly, there's so much dynamics. So also, so we have to find an agile way in how we deal with this, and it's also still difficult because how do you do representation if you don't want to single out single persons to be representatives of groups? Mm-hmm. And I think that is still something that we are trying to find. How can we balance that in a right way? So in our work, we therefore mostly stick to individual stories instead of saying this story is a representative of the Ghanaian story, or it's a very careful balance that you have to try to find, and also if it's about representation of women, not all the women will stand, and not all women artists will stand in the same way in the discussion. So yes, bottom up and fluid, I think.
Yeah. I think we can take another question. We have one for Suhaila. Suhaila, do you feel that since, unlike other countries or the West in general, in the Arab world, we have women leading most of all the major cultural and art institutions? Do you feel this has affected positively the outlook and inclusion of women and their representation?
You know, I would say yes, although I feel like it's not kind of a linear process, because even as women leading these institutions and cultural kind of work in the region, you know, we're still kind of educated in mostly male-dominated environments, and the art histories that we read are normally, you know, of a particular type.
Yes, true.
So while being women, we're still kind of exposed to a lot of the systemic frameworks that are this, you know, let's just call it the status quo. So when you come into the workplace, it does take a while before you kind of deliberately begin to address the representation. Well, in this case, the question was about the representation of women. So it also, I feel, takes a while before you start deliberately and consciously kind of pursuing that. But, you know, having said that, I do often hear comments about sort of the art scene in the region being more inclusive than in other parts of the world. And it's something I probably would say I've experienced too. And, you know, I wouldn't necessarily kind of draw, again, a straight line between that aspect and the idea that it's run by women, but, you know, perhaps there is a correlation to the fluidity with which, you know, women tend to work. Although that's, you know, that's a generalization too. It would take kind of more research and into, you know, ways of women team working, right? Like I don't want to make that assertion, but it does seem like the scene has a little more fluidity and kind of inclusion just that's experienced by people.
Okay, thank you for that answer. I mean, that's really well put. Also someone being from the region and having experienced it firsthand, like you said. So we're running short of time. So just a last question for both of you before we conclude and round up. I mean, from the discussions and the responses that you've given us, we've realized, I mean, so far it's I mean, applying diversity and having it in our programs, it's more of a trial and error up till now, or like an experimental phase that we are all going through. What do you think we can learn from failed projects? I'm sure, I mean, there were times when each of you might have had something and you planned it out really well, but maybe it did not go the right way. Can you maybe just share with us very briefly any of these experiences?
Shall I start, Suhaila?
Of course.
I think there are many things that I can say, many things that failed, and I think you learn the best from the things that failed. But one thing that I really want to highlight, because I think in diversity and especially in participatory work is very important, is the concept of listening. I remember that as a starting up curator, in the beginning, I went into these meetings with the people from the neighborhood, already having a concept of an exhibition and their stories in my mind, and I had my questions ready. And we started to have a conversation. And the interesting thing is that I always ended up leaving these evenings without getting answers to my questions, so frustrated. But also because I was so focused on my own questions, I didn't hear actually the really interesting things that they were saying. And luckily they recorded it, and I could hear myself also back in these situations. And I found out that it's better for me to just sit in and really listen. We call that deep listening, to sit and listen. And actually, that is the best way to get the best out of the stories of the people, and from there start developing an exhibition, and not first start with yourself, because it is not about me. It is about the representation of their stories. So that was a tough one, personally, because I felt I was not a good listener, but it's yielding me a lot now.
Thank you, Daniel. That was a beautiful response, actually. So Hela, would you like to share something with us?
Well, just briefly, I was, after our brief chat yesterday, I was thinking about, this question, and Danielle, I would totally subscribe, because I feel that's probably, you learn that with time. I mean, when you first go into the practice of curating, you kind of have all of these ideas about what you think the artists are trying to say. And then, I completely agree, conversations. You have to communicate, and that's how that's the best you learn. And in the end, the museum is only a channel for the stories. It's not the writer of the stories, and it's about the artists and their objects and their visions. And so I couldn't agree more. I think it's about going to the source and working from there.
Thank you so much. I think those are perfect final remarks for our talk today. I really, really wish we had more time, because I feel there's so much to discuss and so many things to learn and share from both of you. But unfortunately, we're really short of time. So just to round up this fascinating, interesting talk, I mean, as we've seen through these examples, like I said earlier, diversity is not just visual. It's not just in the display or the selection. It's much deeper, and it impacts all levels of a museum or an institution. I mean, it goes to collecting, researching, curating, museum management, education, and even our teams and our selection committees. All of them are involved and work together in making this whole diversity or accessibility possible for communities. Art, like we've seen now, especially, I mean, now with so much happening around the world, art is not just for the elite anymore. Everyone has access to it. Societies are changing and becoming more complex. Histories and narratives are changing and shifting as well. And we are witnessing this in all museums and in all collections and displays as well. So dissemination of knowledge is not one-sided anymore, like we've just seen in this one last hour. I would just in the end like to thank all of you, and thank you so much for your attendance, and a special thank you to both our speakers for this insightful conversation. I'm really sorry if we were not able to take up all the questions, but hopefully, I mean, if you can stay in touch with us, we'll get back to you very soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome everybody to our session today on touchless experiences in children's museums. Thank you so much for everybody who has joined us today. We're very happy to have you, and I'm so glad that you have taken time out of your day to be with us. My name is Maysa Suwaidi. I am Museum Services Manager at Sharjah Museums Authority. I will be moderating today's session. We have two guests with us today from local museums in the UAE. We have Mr. Amin Kharshash, who is the Museology and Multimedia Mediation Manager at the Children's Museum at the Louvre, Abu Dhabi. And then we also have Mr. Purushottam Rachmandani, who I'll refer to as PR, and I hope I didn't butcher your name. He is the founder and the CEO of Oli Oli Children's Museum. Thank you so much, both of you, for being here with us. Of course, it's been a very difficult year for a lot of people and a lot of entities.
museums in particular, and within museums, children's museums. They have been hit the hardest because of the nature of children's museums, in the fact that they are very interactive and there's a lot of touch involved. And of course, as parents, a lot of us were a bit weary about taking our children, about having them interact in a more less isolated setup, I would say. So today we will be having a discussion about this, but first I would like to start by maybe allowing Amin and PR to just give us a little bit of a background on their organizations and what visitors would see when they visit. If we can start with Amin, we'll go alphabetically and then move on to Purushottam. That would be great. Amin, please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum. Hi, everyone. Yeah, first of all, if you allow me, Maisa, I would like to thank you for inviting me to this panel, and also thank Sharjah Museum Authority. It's really a pleasure to be here with you today and to discuss, exchange, and share best practices around this important topic. Yeah, so in a nutshell, within Louvre Abu Dhabi, the Children's Museum is really a specific interpretation space presenting temporary exhibition for around 1 year with original masterpieces and artworks specifically presented for families with children aged from 4 to 10. So it's really an art gallery dedicated for children that could be considered really as a first step to engage with Louvre Abu Dhabi and its collection and its narrative, especially for I would say visitors that would not be art goers or museum goers. The topics of the temporary exhibitions are really made as much as possible attractive and accessible for this audience of children, and taking, of course, their into consideration their specific needs. For the space itself, I would say that the gamification is really at the core of the experience, as we favor learning through experiences, to have children intuitively and naturally looking at artworks and observing closely artworks. And all is made in immersive and spectacular exhibition design to have them fully immersed within the space.
Great, thank you so much. I know we had a little video to show of the Children's Museum. If we're able to show it.
Yeah, that would give you a good idea of what the space looks like.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We'll move on to PR. Go ahead.
Thank you, Maisa. Once again, thank you very much for inviting Ali and myself to speak on this topic. Pleasure to be with you all after lunch hour this day. For those of you who do not know Ali, it means joy in the Hawaiian language. And it is an experiential play museum for families that have kids aged 1 to 11. Our purpose is to provide kids with open-ended and non-judgmental play experiences that are hands-on, that are wholesome, that are joyful, and most importantly, that are true to our developmental objectives as a museum. We do that through 8 different spaces, which are spread across 30,000 square feet. Our galleries are quite distinct and diverse. I'll try and describe them, but I would welcome you to just go to our website to get a better understanding of that. We have the works of Ma'am Toshiko Horyuchi McAdam, who is a wonderful textile artist who basically weaves and crochets these nets that kids can use as climbing spaces. And these are textile works of art in their own right. We are privileged to be partners with Team Lab on the ground and have a permanent installation of Future Park, which was the first such installation that they had in the Middle East. We have a space which is called the Creative Lab, which we keep curating differently depending on exactly what the programming team comes up with to wow the kids. And currently we have a wonderful installation by a gentleman by the name of Luke Jerem called Museum of the Moon in that space. And we have 5 other spaces that basically try and achieve the developmental objectives, or at least try and introduce those objectives to the parents in the most engaging and fun manner possible. We've been open for more than 3 years now, and we've won multiple awards and accolades in our journey. But the thing that we are most proud of is the fact that we have been able to embed ourselves in the community that we intend to serve, and the repeat visitation that we basically get from our guests, which basically is a mark of the kind of impact that we're having in the community and the kind of engagement that we have with the parents that we serve, is really, really high. So I'd just welcome you to go back again to olioli.ae for more information on the museum, but that's us in a nutshell.
It's truly a beautiful space. I can vouch for it.
Thank you.
So we'll move on to our discussion. I'd like us to go back to March 2020. The pandemic is now a pandemic. It's hit. And everything had to close down. I know in the UAE, we're speaking particularly about the UAE, everything had to shut down by end of March, right before spring break, right before a lot of our organizations had spring camps planned. So tell me a little bit about how prepared, or I'll say unprepared, you were, what things you had to put in place and how fast you had to figure it out so that you don't lose your audience, because since they couldn't physically be there, you still want them to be interacting with your organizations. So maybe if you could tell us a little bit about what your organizations did, whether it was the first time or whether it was just something that you had already in place and were able to just sort of activate at that time.
Should I go first, myself?
Sure, go ahead.
The closing the museum came a bit as a sigh of relief for us, counterintuitively, because at the beginning of March, this was a medical problem that was evolving very, very quickly. No one really knew what was going on. There was no news, or there was more news coming every day about how it was changing and how it was impacting lives. And we were a little bit caught in the midst of it, because on one side, it had already had its impact on the psyche of the people. So visitation had plummeted to levels that we had never seen before. But at the same time, we felt like we were required to remain open and not induce any undue panic in the minds of our guests by voluntarily deciding to close our doors. But so when the authorities decided that we all need to close down, the decision was a lot easier for us. And we said, okay, this is the reality. We need to accept it, and we need to basically make the best of it. And in hindsight, that was the best possible thing that could have happened to us, because in the context of the environment right now, because that basically gave us the pause that we needed to reflect on how we could engage with the guests in a different format, in different channels, and started pivoting towards the online side of things and trying to provide programs to our guests through these kits that we prepared that we would chip off to the houses of the children who would partake of these activities, and then hold Zoom sessions very similar to these. We are speaking to an audience that you cannot see and trying to basically have an impact and do something meaningful with them. That was quite well received in the month of July, but eventually I think the burden of the pandemic started showing on the parents, and they wanted to kind of really go out there and let the children sort of lose a little bit, because the schools were already subjecting them to a significant amount of screen time. So the demand for that programming effectively in the month of August plummeted in terms of the online programs, and the demand for physical programs that we were running in the space effectively went up. Now, obviously, capacity restricted the numbers of kids that we could take on board in terms of the summer programs that we had to, I think, about 15% of what we would be able to do in a regular summer camp, but at least it allowed us to continue to serve the parents in a meaningful manner. So that was our experience during the closure.
I mean, if you can tell us a little bit about your experience at the Louvre.
Sure. So back in March 2020, if we rewind it a little bit, for us, we were really running a very successful exhibition at the Children's Museum. It was called Costume Adventure. Actually, it's the video you've seen previously, and it was addressing the topic of the history of costume and how it is represented in a selection of artworks. So the show was really, really successful. We had more than 100,000 visitors. We were, of course, already working on the next show, next exhibition that would be presented after. And then, of course, as all the cultural institutions in the world, we were starting to have this information very, very quickly about the pandemic. So we decided, and it was really one of the most difficult decisions that the museum took, to close the Children's Museum actually prior to the rest of the museum spaces. If you remember, at this time, actually, schools already were already closed at this time before going in a full lockdown. So we closed the Children's Museum because it was really a highly interactive spaces with a lot of digital multimedia, hands-on and so on. And at this time, because of course the safety of our visitors is the most important thing for us, we decided to close the Children's Museum. And I would say weeks after, around 2 weeks after, then came the full lockdown and all the museum closed. So directly when the museum closed, we created a specific dedicated, I would say, task force really dedicated to digital initiatives and online programs. So of course, we were already having a good and strong presence in the digital world, I would say, for Louvre Abu Dhabi, but we created really this specific force to enhance our presence. And it was really a team composed, of course, of the education team of the museum, curatorial, digital marketing team, and the IT team to really start coming with initiatives, ensuring that we keep engaging with our audience online, especially after the museum closure. So I would say specifically for at this moment, we kind of focused more on families and children, as we knew the teachers and the teaching community was at this time really busy trying to set up the program and the remote, all the remote learning processes. So we launched actually two big initiatives on that field. One of them was it's still available actually on our website. It's called Art from Home, where we decided to put on our website all the audiovisual resources we had available in the museum on our website. So it's a collection of more than 30 audiovisuals around the iconic masterpieces of the collection, and along with the activity sheets for children to engage with the collection while at home. And another initiative that we launched pretty much at the same moment was called the Make and Play videos, where our team of mediators released a full series of actually art creation videos in a fun and joyful manner, again, to inspire children and parents to continue creating at home while on full lockdown. So these are, I would say, the initiatives that were specifically targeting the families. And of course, we had also some more generic initiatives. We pushed more and more the Louvre Abu Dhabi application, which is a free app available on Android and Apple Store, and that provides really huge amount of content related to our artworks. We launched a specific immersive podcast actually to discover and to engage in a different way with our architecture, as long as additional other digital initiative to maintain this link with our audience and to make sure to keep them engaged.
That's great. But of course, your museum has remained closed. The Louvre is open, but the Children's Museum is still closed. So do you still see that there is demand for these programs? And PR was telling us how the online programs basically plummeted by August. How has it been for your museum? Is the demand stable? Is it rising or decreasing? Can you tell us a little bit more about the demand for it?
Sure. Actually, what we've noticed, I would say, starting from the beginning of the current school year, is an increased demand. Actually, more coming from schools. So along with all the programs and initiatives we were presenting, we've noticed really an increase in the demands, in the virtual tours that were requested, and in all the activities that involves more schools actually. So just to give you an idea, for example, since the beginning of the school year, we welcomed on all the tours and the initiatives we have online more than 6,000 actually students who participated to our workshops and tours.
That's wonderful. So we're gonna move on past March when as quickly as everything closed, everything was reopening again. So PR, could you tell us a little bit about what measures you had in place, what things you had planned for when you reopen? Did you have enough time to prepare? Did you feel like it was just a sudden decision, or did you feel like you had used the past 3 months to sort of plan for the reopening? Can you just tell us a little bit about all of that?
Oh, that's a great question. I think that was probably more scary as an experience for us to reopen than it was for us to close, even though we are ultimately looking to survive from a business standpoint through the sale of tickets that we have at the museum. But at the same time, we are also parents. And we came together, me and my partners, in this venture to provide kids with a wholesome alternative to passive play that they would otherwise have. And I guess for us, it was very important to make sure that we were comfortable with whatever measures that we took by where we would take our own kids to play, right? So that was for us the primary bar. And all the time, we had to shield ourselves quite well and still provide kids with a safe environment at Oli Oli where they could come and interact with sort of our team and other kids. We did 4 specific things, Maisa, which I think in hindsight do not look like rocket science, but at that particular point in time, it took a lot of work for the team to come up with. So I'm deeply grateful to everybody that worked on it. First thing that we did was we reduced capacity. When we reopened Oli Oli, we were operating at a capacity of less than 20% of what the regulators would have allowed us to get away with, which basically meant we were literally operating at less than 10% of our overall theoretical capacity. And slowly we took that number up based on the confidence that we developed in looking at how people interacted with the spaces. You know, we were concerned about whether people would respect the social distancing rules, whether they would be wearing the mask all the time. And these were all the things that were going on in our heads, because we could keep the space sanitized and spick and span, like really clean. But if somebody is coming too close to me and breathing, around me, then that makes me feel uncomfortable as a guest, right? So that was the first thing that we did, is reduce capacity. 2, we mandated guests to come in at fixed times and encouraged advanced bookings, which was also very useful in managing that capacity number. 3, I think sometime in April, it started becoming clear that this virus is actually more airborne than it is transmitted through touch effectively. So ventilation became a very big thing for us. And given that we operate in an independent building, we had to figure out the solution to ventilate the building literally every single day after the museum was closed, to make sure that we were providing kids and parents with fresh air effectively. We also are sanitizing each space every time. So the duration of the sanitation process at Oli Oli varies between 1 hour to 3 hours, depending on the kind of thing that we're sanitizing. If you're sanitizing Lego bricks, well, you are getting fully sanitized Lego bricks to play with, and then it gets re-sanitized. Whereas in Toshi's nets, we sanitize that space about 5 times a day, at the time of opening, at the time of closing, and 3 times in the middle. And the fourth thing that we did is we tested the team. We are aggressively testing the team all the time to make sure that nobody is basically coming to work sick. We've obviously had to change our entire HR policies and procedures manuals in terms of what is sick leave, given that there are mandatory quarantines in place, and allow the team to feel secure that if they fall sick, they're not economically disadvantaged in any respect at all. And that has allowed us to make sure that we've had a member of our team that has tested positive, fallen sick, but we've not had cross-contamination. So whenever we had somebody who fell sick, we tested the entire team again. And by the grace of God, alhamdulillah, there was no cross-contamination happening at Oli Oli. So we were quite proud of that, basically. So these are the things that we did. From a programming standpoint, we made a change. We wanted to try and introduce kids to the same sense of awe and wonder that we want them to experience through hands-on activities, but this time through a virtual visual experience. So physical visual experience. And we introduced the Museum of the Moon to Oli Oli. And I have a picture of it here. So I'll just try and share it with the team if I can do so. But if not, please, I welcome you to go to the website and find it. Yeah, I can't find it right now, I'm sorry. But the Museum of the Moon is a highly engaging experience for kids to be able to visually interact with a real replica of the moon that's about 5 meters in diameter. So it's a larger than life sculpture and a work of art that is quite enticing. So whereas usually you would have had us do temporary events and programs that are a lot more hands-on in nature, this time we decided to go for a slightly more visually interactive experience, which was quite successful because people still loved it.
Were you concerned about people coming in and expecting a less hands-on experience? Because for those who have not been to Oli Oli is extremely like a touch museum, and interactive, but also touch museum where kids can play with water and Lego bricks and deal with air and climb and so many other things. When people came back, were they expecting the same experience, or do you feel like they were a bit shocked to see that there was not as much of a digital experience as one would think people would expect? Because really at children's museums, it's almost impossible to create a children's museum and not ask them to deal with their motor skills and use their hands and use basically all their senses. So what was the experience when people came back to the museum?
So I think by and large, the experience for the guests has been exceptionally positive, I would say. I think, so we've started since COVID, sending out an automated questionnaire to every guest to comment on how their visit went. So it's very easy for us to actually track how satisfied they have been. One thing that became COVID, I don't know whether it was COVID or something else, but basically the readiness of the team allowed the guests to feel quite safe when they were here. So they actually were, I would say if they were surprised, then they were probably surprised in a manner that they felt we were being responsible, that we were not letting undue number of crowds in just to optimize the ticket sales for that particular day. I think generally I think there is an important point here to talk about, which is around children's mental well-being and emotional health, and introducing them to a ton of technology where they are basically engaging with each other mostly virtually and not having that physical sort of outlet to be able to go out and be a child again. I think most of the parents actually appreciated that we were continuing to be operational, giving them the opportunity to engage through the virtual platform that we provided and the physical space. So they had the choice to engage with us as they like to. But generally, I would say that the satisfaction levels actually, if anything, frankly, I would say since July, the surveys have been showing that people are more satisfied with Oli Oli than they were before COVID, basically.
That's wonderful to hear. I mean, as we referenced before, the Children's Museum part of the Louvre is still closed. The Louvre, however, has reopened and is taking in visitors and children in particular for free. Can you tell us about a little bit about what's happening for children now that the museum is closed, and what your plans are for the reopening of the museum?
Correct. Yes, the Louvre actually reopened its door early July, and we are actually using all the sanitary guidelines, applying all the sanitary guidelines. Some of them were mentioned by Dr. Tam just earlier. Of course, by ensuring to respect the physical distancing. And encouraging our audience actually to pre-book online and to select dedicated slots for their visit, and also by ensuring that we are running at a lower capacity than usual. So when we reopened the museum, actually even during the lockdown, we worked on multiple scenarios concerning the children museum. And finally, we decided to reopen it for the next summer, in June 21, specifically to ensure actually that the visitors will have the best experience possible, and also to secure from our side all the logistics actually around the artworks. As I was mentioning previously, we have loans coming also from abroad, and we wanted to make sure to secure these loans, and also to rework actually on the exhibition design to adapt it to the current situation. So one of the measures we'll be applying for the next exhibition of the Children's Museum will be actually to increase the space of the Children's Museum by covering an additional level on the space, and this level will include actually an external courtyard. So by having more superficie, more space, this will allow us, of course, to welcome more visitors and ensure we are applying strictly all the physical distancing measures on place. Of course, while the Children's Museum is still closed, we have a lot of initiatives going on, and we are still welcoming children in the permanent galleries. So we launched 2 months ago a dedicated kids app available for free for children, so they can of course download it on their own tablet and come engage and enjoy their time in the museum while following this dedicated kids tour. And we have all our resources actually available digitally for children to continue to enjoy their moment at the museum. The next exhibition that will open in the Children's Museum will be actually around a very interesting topic that is art and emotions, and how artists chose to represent emotions in their creations. And more than ever, it's a very important topic given the current situation, and especially where we know how important it is to take care of the emotional development of our little one, especially during this time. And we believe that arts and creation can participate heavily on that and have a very positive impact.
PR, I have a question for you. What does your capacity look like now at the museum? Are you still at a very small percentage of capacity, or what is it at the moment?
So right now we are limiting our capacity to 150 guests over 30,000 square feet of space. And the reality is the number of tickets that we actually sell online allows for a healthy cushion for walk-in visitation. So the number of tickets that we sell online at any given point in time, we would have about 80 to 100 tickets available online effectively for guests to be inside the building. That allows for walk-in visitation to also happen effectively. And even that, we've never breached that number of 150 because of the fact that we are controlling the ticket sales quite aggressively. But the only times when we basically get to 130 number or slightly higher number is when you have the peak times on weekends or during the public holidays, basically, right? But otherwise, I think it's been generally pretty tame.
And so what does your museum look like post-pandemic? How do you feel? I think you and I have spoken about this before, about how, for me as a mother, when I go into a space and there's less people, it's more comforting for me, particularly in the pandemic, in that like I'm able to maintain a distance and be socially distanced from other people. But also in reality, with your museum being a private museum, that's not sustainable in the long term. But my question is for you. Do you think people miss the crowds? They miss the bustle of having so many people in the same room and so many things happening at the same time? Or do you think that in the future people want, like, is there a new normal? Is there a new way of visiting a museum, or particularly a children's museum? Because generally museums tend to be quieter than children's museums. But what do you see the future of Oli Oli?
Yeah, that's an exceptional question, and I wouldn't claim to have the answer to it. I think it's just a matter of subjective judgments. So what we've seen from a visitation standpoint is obviously the numbers are, both by virtue of limited supply, but also by virtue of limited demand, nowhere near where they would be same time last year or the year before that, frankly. I think one thing that is going to probably continue to happen in my mind is and this is the right thing, I welcome it in society as a whole, is a deeper appreciation for outdoor spaces, for kids to just be outdoors by themselves with their friends. It's that natural play environment that you just cannot replicate in an indoor space, right? And that's fantastic. If my kids end up being a little bit closer to nature as a result of this thing, I think that's, there's a good thing that comes out of it. If it means less visitation for us as a museum, that's something that we have to live with, because I think as a whole that's a positive development. But for people who do choose to come and experience an indoor setting, I think people have short memories eventually. And once the normal comes back, I think there will be a quick reversion, not maybe a V-shaped one, but I think there will be a quick reversion to the mean and the madness of the people around you, and everybody just having a gala time and you getting swept up in that euphoria. That's my personal feel.
Okay, well, I hope that that things do go back to some sense of normal. In the meantime, though, we're very lucky to still be able to visit places and be safe. Luckily, we have people from around the world with us today, but luckily in the UAE, everybody is wearing masks, which makes it so much more safer and allows us to be able to experience these things. I have a question for both of you before we go on and take questions from our audience today, and that would be, what would have been the biggest challenge since March for your institutions, and what's your takeaway from this pandemic? What do you think you have learned, and what do you think is a change that will be a permanent change that has come because of this pandemic? I mean, maybe you could start.
Yes, thank you for this. It's a very interesting question indeed. I would say for me, maybe the biggest learning from this challenging period was to see that that museums as cultural institutions are more important than ever. As cultural institutions, of course, but not only, as also as social spaces, as inclusive spaces, they are really more important than ever in the society. Especially when we see the people who turned to museums to find relief, to find peace, and well-being. So yeah, this I would say for me it's the biggest learning, and as a consequence of that, what is really important for us as museum is to continue tirelessly, even if we are closed, to continue to share our narrative and to share our incredible stories with our audience. Of course, to visit the museum should be the most important experience. But even if a museum is closed, he should continue to share by all means its story, its collection, its narrative with the broadest audience possible.
Thank you. And PR?
Yeah, so I guess the biggest challenge for us this year, I think personally as the founder and leader of this institution, has been to keep the team motivated. There is so much uncertainty around them, around their friends, around their families, around their work, that to keep them effectively optimistic for the future, because eventually this too shall pass, nothing is permanent, has been an interesting challenge, because it has brought in a lot more of the personal elements of their lives and their stories to the fore, which I am privileged to be a part of effectively. And that has been, I think, one of the biggest challenges. I think the other challenge has obviously been a business related one, a financial one, which is to basically make the decision to keep the doors open, even though financially it doesn't make the sense to do so. It's to keep the operating hours at more or less the same levels as before, even though it doesn't make sense to do so. To keep investing in programming, to keep bringing new experiences to the kids and to families, even though financially it doesn't make sense to do so. So those decision-making situations and events have been quite challenging as well. The one thing that I would say that we are going to take away from this experience is we've basically stopped thinking about Oli Oli as a building, right? And we are now starting to think of Oli Oli as an experience that could basically be provided to kids anywhere. And we know what the hallmarks of those experiences are, what the key ingredients for that experience are. And we ask ourselves the question how we can deliver that in different settings and different formats through different channels, so that we don't become reliant effectively just by the number of people that walk in through the door, but by impacting kids and families outside of just the four walls that we control here. So that has been a very positive learning for us.
Great. I'm lucky because my daughter, Oli Oli is her favorite place. So I'm lucky you're still around. I know a lot of children's museums, particularly private ones, were hit really hard and had to close. So really it is a blessing to have spaces like that available for children still. I will take a question from the audience before we close. I know we're almost running out of time and we want to make sure that we stick to our schedule. We have a question here that says, with parents hoping for, or like with parents choosing to keep their children at home because of the pandemic, do you guys see this as an opportunity for your museums to replace, like temporarily replace your education needs with online programs and workshops, working with school teachers rather than particularly geared towards families and parents?
So I know Amin had a wonderful point and a data point to suggest on that, and I'll let him expand on that. Our personal experience has been spot on. That question really touches a very, very good point, because there has been a massive demand from schools for programs that can be delivered virtually. We are working with a few schools that we are very close to develop those programs for them that achieve the pedagogical objectives that they have, but also allow kids to have a fun time, which is what our goal is effectively. But that is exactly the point that we are going to be investing a lot of our time and effort in during the first quarter of next year, is to try and deliver that experience to the kids, either in the classroom or at home, through the facilitation and involvement of the teachers to make sure that it's pedagogically relevant. That's a very good question.
Amin?
Yes, totally. As I was mentioning, there is currently really a huge demand from schools to offer actually virtual tours, especially coming from the Ministry of Education, and to offer more online programs actually to keep the kids engaged. And I think this trend is gonna last a little bit personally, because if again, if we come back almost just I would say a year before, I mean, very few museums were providing actually online activities or virtual tours, live virtual tours, and initiatives like that. Whether now it really accelerated and became a new normal. And paradoxally, we need also to in a way to think of it also as an opportunity, because previously we were, as I would say, museum, maybe from the educational side, concentrating on let's say the schools and the communities that are around the museum, that are in the town or in the country. Yeah, whether now, I mean, sky is the limit. We can offer really our programs to the whole world. So and the reach in terms of audience is really huge. So I think this is really a trend that's gonna last for a while.
Thank you both for your input. I know we're sort of running towards the end of our session now. I wish we would have had more time. This discussion has been really interesting. Again, thank you so much for being with us. Thank you to our audience for being with us today. We hope that this has been an interesting talk for everyone. And yeah, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure talking to both of you, and I hope everybody stays safe. Good luck, Amin, with the reopening of your gallery next year, and PR, best of luck with your museum, which is like a second home to our family. We absolutely love it. So thanks a lot, everybody. Please stay safe, wash your hands, socially distance, wear your masks, and hopefully we'll see you all in person soon. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Maisa.
Thank you, guys.
It was a pleasure. Thank you, Parshutam.
Thanks, Amit. See ya.
See you soon.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Evolving Museum, Adapting Learning and Exhibiting in the New Era conference. My name is Zlatan Filipovic, and I'm professor at the College of Architecture, Art and Design at the American University of Sharjah. And I will be moderating the digital experiences for museum audiences session webinar. It is my pleasure to welcome Chris Michaels and Elizabeth Galvin. So please allow me to introduce you briefly. Chris Michaels, Director of Digital Communications and Technology at the National Gallery in London. His directorate has responsibilities for digital services, membership, and ticketing, creative, IT and marketing, press and public affairs. Before he joined the gallery, he was the head of digital and publishing at the British Museum. He acted as an advisor to the Humboldt Forum and to museums in Qatar and Singapore. Before entering the world of museums, he was a CEO of educational startup Mindshapes. He has a PhD from the University of Bristol. Welcome, Chris. Elizabeth Galvin, head of the learning and digital programs at the Victoria and Albert Museum. She's an anthropologist and digital humanist specialist. She works with the leading learning portfolio across the Victoria and Albert for a wide range of audiences, including schools, adults, communities, young people, families, and higher education, as well as the Victoria and Albert's Artist in Residence program. Additionally, she leads research, formation, implementation of digital programs, and educational technology. Once again, a very warm welcome to both of you to this webinar. So with the lockdown and social distancing measures, many museums opted to offer a wide variety of digital experiences through virtual exhibitions and live or pre-recorded educational sessions. This has led audiences to access new opportunities that weren't possible before due to time or location boundaries. Can we start this webinar by me asking you to tell us more about your work and which digital experiences do your institutions currently offer, and what audiences do these programs focus on?
Great. Well, thank you very much for having me here today. It's a huge pleasure. So, as Zlatan said, my area of responsibility at the National Gallery is quite broad, covers many of the things we do both in digital and in the wider organisation. This year has been an extraordinary year by any standards, and the things that we've had to do this year to adapt have had to therefore be extraordinary to respond to that. What we've seen this year, more than anything else, is an incredible kind of demand from audiences for new types of digital experience, whether that's purely educational pieces for school children who of course have been unable to access the gallery, whether that's new types of commercial products. We now have tours of our exhibitions that you can access as a pay-per-view offering, whether that's an increase in demand for virtual tours of the gallery in a kind of 3D format. All of these things have suddenly accelerated this year. What I think is most important about what's happened over that period of time is it's given us the chance to broaden what we do and the chance to serve audiences in different ways. There's things we've done this year that we probably would never have done otherwise. I'll take an example of a series of videos we made that are around kind of meditation. I don't think we'd ever have got to those given the different types of kind of priorities and pressures we normally have. But kind of lockdown and the chance for kind of creative thinking that it's enabled us to have has given us the chance to broaden the range of things we do and to serve our audiences in new and kind of hopefully very exciting ways.
Thanks. Yeah, that's a really kind of like a quick cover and a wholesome kind of a capture of the challenges that everybody was facing over the last 9 months. Elizabeth.
Yes, thank you so much for having me here today. It's been a really great session so far, a really great workshop. So at the V&A, we've been doing quite a lot digitally. I mean, we did quite a bit before, but obviously in the COVID landscape, that's shifted quite a bit about how one has approached different types of learning activities from this. So shifting from kind of a largely in-person audience to a mostly online audience has been an exciting challenge that I'm sure most museum professionals has also faced. So in the learning department, we work with a range of audiences. So that's everything from formal education, so that's school children, all the way up to kind of higher education. And with that, in the digital sphere, we've been working on online learning, live online learning sessions, digital videos that can be used in the classroom, teachers' resources, but also we run teachers' live professional development sessions where we bring in different speakers to help teachers bring creativity and help them work in the classroom. We also do informal learning. So that's with families. We run families making workshops online. We have a weekly blog series for families to do together. And then we also work with young people. So that's usually around kind of 16 to 24-year-olds. With that, we have a youth collective that meets online entirely now. We also have some digital outputs that they've helped put together there. And then also one of our target audiences is a program that we call Audience Outreach. And that's a group we work with audiences that are at risk of social exclusion and social isolation. So with this group, for example, we work with hospital schools where we've been delivering teacher training programs to the educators who work in the hospital. Obviously, we can't go into the hospital right now. For children, we also have been continuing our work developing 3D prints of objects that we've actually been able to deliver to the museum, and that's being used in hospital settings for children to do museum-based education. We also work very closely with University College London on a program for people who suffer from dementia and their carers. So running those sessions virtually as well. And then also this program strand works very closely with refugees and asylum seekers in the UK. So again, seeing how we can shift these programs, a lot of these art therapy programs online and continue to deliver them. And then we also have our artist in residence program, which timing wise kind of wrapped up a bit this year, but then we're going to be going into next year. And what's been great is tapping into our residents to see how they can also help deliver across these different programs as well. Across the wider museum, we of course offer adult learning workshops via the V&A Academy, which is kind of more longer term courses, art history courses that people would want to take. Usually those are delivered in person, those are now all delivered online. And then of course, wider social media outputs, curators tours, general audience outputs. And I think the thing that's been really exciting about this is it's kind of a bit going into Terra Nova of seeing how your audience changed, because when you know your audience in person, it's very different than your audience online. And seeing how these have shifted over the past few months has been a really exciting but rewarding challenge, and seeing how we can grow our audiences and expand our work there. Thank you.
Thanks. I mean, listening about growing audiences in all these kind of situations of additional kind of pressures and constraints that have been put on all of us, like it just sounds like a mini science fiction kind of a story. Looking at the social media channels of, for example, the National Gallery, I mean, seeing like 1.7 million kind of followers on Instagram and over, 150,000 followers on YouTube channels, it just kind of shows about how big the audiences really are that follow these programs. Chris mentioned earlier that there were especially newly developed programs to cater for these needs of almost kind of like a self-help, like this meditation programs in a way that were very much and nicely focused on a very, I would say, intense production, 5-minute programs per painting or per session, right, for these things. It's difficult to imagine that all of these things have been still going on in these times of a very difficult production times and kind of distancing and social distancing, as you were saying. Like, it seems as the volume of the work has really kind of even increased more. How are you guys coping with it?
Well, I mean, I think you've got to put it in kind of historic context for an institution like the gallery, like the V&A. In 196 years of the gallery, we've only ever been closed for 2 whole weeks before, and that was during the Second World War. The closure of March to July was 111 days. So, and for an institution like us and any public institution, that kind of hurts. We're there to be available for the public. So we took it as our responsibility to kind of take that digital moment seriously and try and kind of both produce more and better and different than we did before. And it's a learning process. I mean, April seems a long time ago for everybody now. It's a different universe. But if you think back to that early days of lockdown, as producers of content, we had to learn how to make stuff remotely. Before the gallery's always been our film set, and we send people in and they talk in front of paintings, and they it's an amazing kind of film location to work in. But now, of course, we just had everybody's front room or study or kitchen to work through. So we had to work out how to do that. How do you produce a video remotely that's good quality that people want to watch, and what should the subject matter be? And again, kind of lockdown and coronavirus has inevitably become part of the subject matter of everything this year. And as people who want to share art with the world, it's what we do. We had to look to the collection to find out what those new stories could be. So thinking about interiors and how painters like Vermeer had kind of thought about interior worlds and what it meant to be at home, or thinking about how art can help at moments like that, as we try to do with meditation. And so it's been a really interesting creative journey, both from a production point of view, but also from a kind of thematic point of view, to work out what the stories are that would resonate most with people in this most kind of extreme and extraordinary of years.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Elizabeth, maybe if you want to kind of pitch in on
yeah.
this, or
yeah, I think the thing that Chris had a really great point there is museums, we feel almost sad when we're closed. This is where we exist there to have people in the space. And whilst of course it's wonderful that the museum has reopened socially distanced in London, we have, what has been great though for us is that from an educational standpoint, for the past few years actually, we've been looking at a program of how can we get museum objects, ideas, museum education outside of the brick and mortar museum of itself. So this is something that we were looking at kind of pre-COVID. So how do we get things to regional museums? How do we work with schools across the country that aren't in London? How do we work, especially working in areas with child deprivation, you know, poorer areas, where how can we make sure that these children have access to museum education and different types of programs. So that was done, you know, working with regional partners. That was done with working directly with schools nationally. That was through kind of some national design challenge that we run called V&A Innovate. So we've been leading up to this, and when COVID hit, it just seemed kind of a natural next step to take a lot of this ethos that we had been working towards with museum education and putting it online. So again, a lot of the work that we had done regionally, working closely with that, we've decided to again, run those sessions online, really target that. So it was kind of an actual natural shift in a wider progression, because whilst what happens in the museum and gallery space cannot be understated, you know, we welcome hundreds of thousands of learners every year. We have millions of visitors. We're used to developing programs at large scale. When you shift this online, of course, that's going to change the different type of contact, but it's all about understanding the ethos of what you're trying to communicate, what you're trying to teach your audiences, and how can that be translated across the different media.
Yeah, I mean, I was looking at the recently at the website of the Victoria and Albert, and I saw that even one of the exhibitions that has been kind of put and scrambled together is All Will Be Well, which basically addresses immediately the situation of what everybody's going through, the whole planet. And Chris was relating to that as a theme potentially that's going to inform the exhibitions to come very soon. Can you tell us maybe more about this exhibition?
Yeah, this is a fantastic exhibition that was put together by the V&A Museum of Childhood, which is just an absolutely fantastic one. So in the UK, and you know, I know this was also popular across Europe, children were drawing rainbows and using the phrase, you know, all will be well, just to kind of support our fantastic NHS workers, our National Health Service, but also to kind of show solidarity and kind of create community spirit. So as a fantastic project, we collected some of the rainbows that the children had drawn. And we, of course, you know, we did some interviews with them, and it was all about kind of live collecting of what that is. So we've been actually able to turn that into an in-person exhibition that it's free exhibition that anyone can visit now to see what the pandemic has been through and what lockdown has been through the eyes of children, and giving them a space about the importance of making and community that has come out. And again, the V&A Museum of Childhood has done a fantastic job with this. And it was born out of actually a blog series that we started writing that Brendan Cormier, our senior curator of design, wrote, called Pandemic Objects, where each of us in the museum took the time to write a blog post about what is the one object that represents the pandemic. So of course we had masks and hand sanitizer, but it was everything from the home haircut, the mustaches and beard that a lot of our colleagues grew during working from home, all the way to the pandemic object I chose was the laptop to talk about education from home. And rainbows was one of them, and it really resonated with our audiences. And I think what's fantastic is in a museum context, it's not just a matter of collecting the past, it's collecting the present tense for the future and allowing space for audiences to express that. And so having that kind of mixture of in-person and digital activity has been a really fantastic output. And I think the V&A Museum of Childhood has done a really fantastic job with that exhibition.
Thanks. I mean, it really looks very interesting. I wish I had an opportunity to go and visit it like in person in a way, as you're saying that it's open also in this kind of a hybrid blended mode of the visits. Another thing that Chris mentioned earlier was that there was a sudden kind of a request to produce so many more virtual experiences. And looking at the website on the National Gallery, there has already been a history of the virtual tours and experiences that have been designed and produced over the years, right? Was there anything new that has actually kind of managed to materialize itself, Chris, now over the last year?
Well, I mean, those virtual tours, you know, they had a kind of amazing moment for most museums around the beginning of April, where you saw this kind of huge spike of traffic where, you know, everyone was at home, people were looking for things to do, you know, beyond the world of Netflix and Amazon Prime Video. They were, you know, you were looking for different stuff. and those tours, you know, suddenly got huge traffic. Those tours have their limitations. You know, they can be quite flat, and they represent moments in time. I mean, as you say, they're kind of the historic documents really for me, rather than kind of living ones, because they get kind of digitized at a precise moment where the pictures are in one particular order, you know, and the one room's closed for refurbishment or whatever. So they are very much a kind of historic capture rather than a living one. I think the real truth for me this year is that those kind of 3D kind of virtual representations, they're not really where the audience really wants to be. Where the audience really wants to be is in brilliantly kind of executed video content. You know, that living experience, you know, using the same media as Netflix and those things where so many people have spent their time, and the kind of human contact that brings with the voice of the curator or educator or whoever's kind of leading you through that to me has really been the kind of the winner this year. If you were kind of backing a winner, that's the one you back. And it's to me where the kind of the mid to long term future of this stuff lies, and whether it's, you know, the amazing courses that the V&A are delivering online or we're delivering online, whether that's you know, paid tours, whether that's free tours, whatever it is, getting kind of human beings in front of a camera, letting them tell a story to audiences, and, you know, potentially kind of interacting with them in interesting ways. That, you know, that's really what we are doing, and really what we should be doing more of, and we can get great, you know, fantastic at doing it well.
Yeah,
I completely, oh, sorry.
Sorry, I was just about to say that I kind of just pasted a list of links from the National Gallery with these tours and the you know, kind of meditative sessions that also kind of Chris was relating to. But yeah, sorry, Elizabeth, for interrupting.
I was just going to agree with Chris's point there. I think the thing that's really interesting in this is that our power that I'm finding in museums isn't necessarily these really high-tech digital outputs. It's not these like big VR programs. Of course, they have their space and they're fun to play with. But I think the big kind of winner for this that all museums have is access to your experts, and you know, people like to peek behind the curtain. They like to see kind of what goes on behind the scenes of a museum. And I think that's been kind of our big hits there, is just a chance for, you know, having one of our artists in residence run a workshop on like, this is how I tend to make something, or one of their curators talking about their favorite objects, or little things like that. People are craving almost that human connection rather than kind of interactivity necessarily with more images and text. And so it doesn't take a lot for, you know, I saw kind of in the questions there, somebody talking about from smaller museums. I mean, it doesn't take a lot really to run kind of a Zoom workshop with one of your curators, or to run something, you know, kind of a teacher's event with one of your museum educators. And I think that's what has been the real proven winner of a lot of these different content programs.
Nice. At the same time, I have to say, at the Victoria and Albert's kind of a museum website, I was inspired by a conversation that we had as in preparations for this session. You mentioned that an upcoming exhibition that's going to be the Curious Alice, or basically that's a VR experience that is being produced now to promote the actual upcoming exhibition. And I believe due to open sometime early March next year. But the amazing thing was really that, like, with the collaboration that Victoria and Albert Museum has made with Vive Art or technology company, there was this really interesting gamified experience produced that showcases a beautiful artwork inspired by the original etchings and the original kind of like a paper theater kind of setups that are physically in collections in the collection of the Victoria and Albert Museum. It was just amazing to kind of see and experience that VR project at these distances, and you know, it basically kind of can enter anybody's home, and it was a really interesting experience. I think designed for kids, but still really nicely put project that I would say that provided such a nice insight to the actual original artwork, and also reinterpretation using these novel and new technologies. Speaking of which, you know, many museums have opted for these blended new modes of bringing back the audiences. What did you find most successful as the mode of kind of bringing the audiences back in? Is it workshops, or is it guided tours with curators? in question?
I mean, I think it's been all of those things in a way. Is that I said on one side, kind of pre-recorded and live video gives you scale. You know, you can reach extremely large audiences, and the video travels in many directions across the internet. I think on the other side, you know, the remarkable way our education team and people at least have kind of have flipped from in person to online, you know, shows the amazing resilience of Zoom and how kind of flexible it is to kind of being able to do this kind of stuff, and that, you know, the whole world's been able to kind of do it, and to be able to keep serving those audiences. Because on one side, you know, you think about digital, you think about growing to very, very large audiences, but so much of what museums do is kind of in person to a very small handful of people. And you don't want that handful of people to disappear as you pursue, you know, millions and billions of people. You've got to make sure that those 5 people who you really, really need to reach, whether they're disadvantaged communities, teachers, specialists, you've got to make sure you can keep doing that job. And I think it's the balance between those two of kind of being able to reach very large digital audiences and to keep on serving kind of specialist audiences, which has been a real kind of, you know, a real victory this year, and how enabled people to keep doing their jobs. You know, the museums employ many people who are there just to do that specialist audience relationships, and the fact that many of us have been able to keep on doing that, I think, is incredibly important in you know, the most challenging circumstances.
Yeah, I mean, looking also at the recent kind of activities on digitizing or actually producing kind of these photogrammetric 3-dimensional modeling of many of the 3D objects that museums are now undertaking worldwide, opens up a whole new platform of kind of embedding these and making them accessible almost in a tangible way at an AR or VR kind of a technology platforms, right? Has that something that you think might be an interesting next step in this kind of a post-COVID thing, and when maybe the traveling is much more limited, so to enable the collections or parts of the collection to actually kind of like reach out and move towards the audiences?
I do think I'll jump in here and say, Chris knows this because I've been working on like 3D prints for a very, very long time. And so I think he's heard my spiel about 3D prints for a while. I absolutely think they have a place, you know, 3D, whether it's 3D modeling, kind of photogrammetric models, you know, different types of objects on websites like Sketchfab or other ones there. They absolutely have their place. And I think that they can be really exciting ways of engagement. We've been working with 3D prints for years now. And it's not just looking at the plastic one, it's getting really nice 3D prints made. So we have a partnership with Great Ormond Street Hospital, which is one of the largest pediatric hospitals in the world, where we get really nice 3D prints made of our objects in different materials that are very similar to the actual materials. What's great about these is that they're wipe clean, so you can sterilize them in between use with the different ones. So we were working with children who are in medical isolation well before the COVID crisis. So it's actually been a great project to have that. We also work with getting them printed in different types of materials. Kind of more squishy materials for children who have sensory challenges and want to engage with different types of museum objects. I think they absolutely have their place, but I think like VR and like a lot of these different ones, it's all about knowing your audience. And it's not just kind of making these big pieces just to make them and see who wants to do it. It's usually, let's make something that has a really specific need that we know our audience wants. So we know this works really well in a hospital setting. We know this works really well in places where objects might not be able to go travel. And of course, some people like looking at VR and AR online. And I think I can completely see that with different types of 3D modeling. I was going to say, kind of in addition to this, I think one of the most exciting things that has come out of this COVID landscape is kind of really this prototyping and iterative spirit in museums. And so we have a partnership that's coming up in January with CERN, which is, you know, the European Agency for Nuclear Science, with the Large Hadron Collider. So we're running education sessions, live broadcast from the Large Hadron Collider, that is talking about the importance of intersection between STEAM education, so science, technology, engineering, arts, and maths, and the importance of creativity in a lot of these programs. And it's been a really fantastic project working with CERN, but they've been completely flexible to it. We've been open to it. Whereas before, our education program would be much more focused about delivery in person. these types of kind of online piloting programs where you can see how can you bring different people together and create online digital projects with really minimal contribution from different organizations has been truly fantastic.
I think it's a really important point. And you know, whenever really difficult things happen in the world and they create constraints, whether that's war, you know, medical pandemics like this, what gets unlocked from them is kind of huge waves of innovation. And I think, you know, within the context of museums, you're seeing some really brilliant innovative work this year, you know, that's going to unlock kind of what the next 10, 20, 30 years of museum practice looks like. And whether that is things like 3D digitization, whether that is, you know, the kind of works we talked about today, like it's the beginning of a different way of acting. You know, it's not like it got totally invented this year. A lot of it's been kind of happening on smaller scale for the last decade or more, but it's been kind of unlocked and people realize how critical it is to the future of museums. And, you know, now's the time to really press on and kind of just do more of it and kind of work out what this stuff really means for the long term for everybody.
Nice. Thanks for that. Let's make Wednesdays. Does that ring a bell to anybody?
Sure, I'm happy to talk about that. So this is a weekly blog activity that we've had that kind of just started during lockdown that just focuses on making. And I think it kind of goes back to what we were saying earlier is what was so successful about these is tapping into different people around the museum of what they like to make, tying into different objects. So this, to back it up a bit, it's a weekly activity that we post every Wednesday. It's aimed at 7 to 11-year-olds. It's written directly to be read by them. And it mainly started during lockdown when children were at home doing virtual education. And it was purposely designed so, you know, parent was often also working from home could, you know, dip in and out and just kind of help. And these making activities or design activities were purposely designed so it could just use things that were around the house. So we didn't require, you know, special paints or clay or type things. We really wanted this to be as inclusive as possible. And although it was shared online, the entire point of this was to get kids making away from screens, to really kind of reconnect with that ludic, that physical making skill that is so important, that we've really seen a lot of children have lost during kind of home education sessions, virtual school sessions, is that importance of getting that fine motor skills. And so these weekly activities have been really fantastic in just a sense that we ask the audience to kind of, you know, go away and then share via social media. And we also really cognizant of the digital divide. So, you know, not everybody's going to have a laptop. Not every child's going to have access to this. This can be done via, you know, a mobile phone. This can be read and printed out, and then they can be done away from screens. So we wanted to make sure that children had access to engagement with the museum, you know, because the digital divide and digital poverty is a really big issue. And I think that the COVID situation has really shown that globally, there's in every nation, there's a huge challenge of some of the poorest children not having access to digital technology at the same level as everybody else.
And I guess that kind of ties in so nicely to some of the comments earlier in the sessions about the museum as a place of inclusiveness, and really kind of thinking also about, like, you know, how to really address the needs of the various audiences. I guess the National Gallery also has that series of make and create, Chris, right? That was also kind of the way to get the things engaged about, you know, practically making things, right? Anything else?
Well, I mean, that's right. I mean, it's, you know, I have small kids, so I know the challenge of that kind of lockdown period to keep them active and give them something to do so you can do something else. And, you know, I think, again, museums have done an amazing job of finding these creative moments that lets people engage, and, you know, found children as a great kind of subject for some of that kind of digital work. So we've done that with Make and Create. And, you know, the other thing about it is the way that it's kind of unlocked talent in museums. You know, the people who've kind of written those blog posts, starred in those videos, you know, sometimes the work they do, because it's kind of, again, focused on particular specialist audiences, can be a bit hidden from you know, they're not like the superstar curators and some of those roles. So kind of bringing those people to the front of the organization and letting their work be seen by mass audiences, I think has been a, you know, a really important thing to do.
Yeah, there was some, I guess we already kind of ran through the first 30 minutes of our kind of a conversation and discussions, and there are a few comments or questions that are coming from the audience. Some of them are turned towards the intellectual property and a lot of these new digital kind of experiences being developed, potentially just kind of like not really respecting in full or not being aware fully of that intellectual property kind of for different countries. Can a museum, or how can a museum kind of find some sort of, or be some sort of a guidance for the best practice about this? Has that been a conversation at all that you will have time and energy to engage in these times of the pandemic?
Well, I mean, rights and intellectual property rights is one of the key underlying things that organisations have to deal with. So, I mean, if you think about the National Gallery releasing a 30-minute video that you can pay for about an exhibition, practically what that's meant has getting permission from every lender of a picture into that exhibition, allowing us to do that. And you know, what that means, if we want to do more of that for the future, is we need to kind of behave more systematically about how we kind of request those rights as part of the exhibition loan. So, you know, it's about seeing this as a path of evolution. I don't think it's a big challenge. It's like it's an operating behavior change rather than a kind of underlying challenge. But you know, it's another piece of kind of background work that organisations like ours have to deal with to make the experiences we want for our audiences. And sometimes that's confusing for lenders, you know, who don't, you know, they think they're just lending their picture to a gallery for 3 months, but then they're kind of actually, you know, unlocking the potential for video, 3D digitalisation, and all this other stuff. So, you know, the owners of those pictures now have to kind of come on that journey with us to helping to kind of create art, new art experiences for the public.
Thanks. Elizabeth, maybe from your end?
Yeah, I do think it's important to note that for a lot of IP issues with that, in many nations, there's usually kind of an educational, I don't know what one would call it, but there's usually a specific kind of tag that things can be used for educational purposes. When it comes to kind of IP, of course, each nation is different, and it's something that's really hard to kind of look for it. But you know, we usually work with IP and clearances. How do we pull this type of thing? You know, we'd be doing that anyway if it was delivered kind of in person. It doesn't really shifted that much of being put online. It's more kind of, as Chris was saying, it's shifting the kind of legwork a little bit. But from an educational context, usually for classroom use and for a lot of different other ones, we have a lot of flexibility there. For a place to look if one's interested in IP or wants kind of IP things, free things that can work, I'd say, you know, check out a lot of the different Creative Commons licenses and see what's available with those, because a lot of them have resources and images that can be used freely via different Creative Commons licenses.
The Creative Commons, follow it first, and then see if anything else needs to happen after that. Great, thanks. So I guess, you know, maybe a bit a personal question. What was your favorite project that you saw that the museums pulled off as an experience, I would say, that you've kind of managed to see in these kind of times over the last 9 months that have been scrambled and put together, and you would say, wow, this experience really kind of stood out in a sense, more than anything else I've seen in this times. And I know this now requires like a little kind of a, you know, a pause to reflect and think. But yeah, if anything comes to mind, just kind of please shoot it out. Otherwise, I can maybe try to kind of go.
Well, I mean, for me, it's an easy question really, in that, you know, the most important digital project we took on this year was the one where we had to kind of rebuild the visitor experience around digital for getting reopened in July. You know, that means that everyone who comes to the National Gallery has to book in online before they get here. It means that their journey before they come to the gallery becomes as critical as the one that they have during their time at the gallery, and the way that we then kind of build a marketing relationship with them afterwards. And, you know, at one of the most kind of symbolic and important moments in the gallery's history, sort of executed that project well, to have seen that, you know, visitor satisfaction responses went up by kind of 10–15%, and that we kind of we did a good job for our audiences. That to me is the most crucial thing that we've done this year. And then some of the kind of subtle bits about kind of knitting more digital into that experience, so that, you know, if you book a ticket for our Titian show, before you come, you'll now get a kind of exclusive piece of video that's kind of preparing you as a visitor to come into the museum. That kind of more and more deeper weaving of kind of digital into the gallery experience, that seems to me the most important thing for the future, because really those are the things that definitely won't go away. You know, they become the bedrock for what the future museum journey comes like, and I think that's incredibly important. I say that at one of the most important moments in the gallery's history over the last 200 years.
I would kind of totally also agree with you that there was so many different platforms in regards like a social media and then website and then a YouTube channel, and then kind of trying to kind of find a way to weave these all in and connect them in this one kind of holistic experience seems to be really the best kind of way forward in this way to respond to connecting all of the experiences and making it unique.
We've got to make sense of how they all fit together over time, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much. This was a really kind of a great and exciting kind of a questions and answers. I'm so happy that we had this opportunity to get all of these insightful and beautiful pieces of information from you guys. If there's anything else you would additionally like to add at the end of the panel, I guess the tickets are open now. The UK guests can come to the UAE. Maybe Sharjah Museum authorities can do something about this to get you guys a short break, maybe.
I haven't left this room for 9 months, so anywhere else would be nice.
I think we could both use the vitamin D and the sunshine.
But yes, thank you once again. I would really like to thank you for your energy and participation in kind of explaining in detail all of the things that you have done over the past 9 months and responding to this, and also the new plans and the developments for the near future and how the museums are, or at least museums you work on, are going to move on forward towards presenting and putting new exhibitions together. I would also at this time like to use the opportunity to thank Sharjah Museum authorities for organizing this event and such an interesting 4 panels or webinars that we saw today. Thank you once again for being here with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.